Chapter 106. That night, Hien's entire body was soaked. When he returned home, he once again fetched water to bathe in his room and changed into dry clothes before stopping. Xiao Ju's cloak was wet. Hien went to find Shan Mushiwe to find some pancreatic soap to wash it clean. He tied a rope to a tree outside the door and hung it properly. He planned to give it back to Shan Mushiwe when it was dry. It was a bit of a hassle, but the good intentions of the group of Liang Province Guard instructors were not completely wasted. When he woke up the next day, Hien only felt that his entire body was free of worry. The morning was warm and comfortable. The hot springs could cure illnesses. It wasn't nonsense. She quickly climbed out of bed to freshen up and hurried up. When it was time to eat, she saw the people of the vanguard training their paces on the practice field. Leiho stood at the very front. The vanguard battalion and the normal recruits were already differentiated in terms of their clothing. The normal recruits only had 2 sets of clothing, one red and one black. In spring and summer, they wore unlined clothing. In autumn and winter, there was a thin layer of cotton sewn between the layers. Other than the belt, the clothing didn't have any other adornments. The cut wasn't very fitting. The large clothing would have the sleeves rolled up. For those who were slightly fatter like Hong Shan, the clothing would be stretched taut, as if it would tear apart at any moment. The people of the vanguard battalion wore dark blue riding uniforms. The fabric was much finer than theirs. It also seemed to fit them very well. This group of people were the 1,000 most outstanding people chosen from the Liang Province Guard. Each of them had an imposing appearance. Standing there, they made people feel intimidated. Leiho was born tall and outstanding. When he wore the riding uniform, it seemed as if it was tailor-made for him. Yesterday, he heard the instructors say that his performance in the Vanguard Battalion was also very outstanding. It was probably because of this that the instructors had him stand at the very front of the line. Thus, he was awe-inspiring and particularly eye-catching. Hien was entranced by the sight. Suddenly, Hong Shan walked up behind him. Seeing this scene, he patted his shoulder. "What's wrong? You don't feel good?" "No," Hien said. "I just feel that the clothing of the Vanguard Battalion is much better looking than our clothing." "Not as clothes?" Upon hearing this, Xiao Mai interrupted. "I heard that they eat better than us. They get 2 more steamed buns and meat porridge every day." "All right, stop talking." Hong Shan interrupted my Mai's incessant chatter. "Can't you see that your brother he is annoyed?" "Hien, I'm not jealous of him." "That's right." Xiao Mai was afraid that Hien would be sad, so she added, "It was defeated by Ahiga. What's so great about him?" Hien smiled. Just as he was about to speak, Leiho seemed to have noticed their gazes and turned his head. When he saw Hien, he was startled, but he quickly shifted his gaze and focused on training. "This kid is pretty wild." Hong Shan sighed. "Incredible." Hien didn't make a sound. He continued to stand in place, watching Leiho train for a while. Only when Liang Ping urged them to hurry overdid Hien give up. Just as the instructors had said, Leiho's footwork was not bad. He was nimble and agile. He was indeed worthy of being a member of the Vanguard Battalion. However, Hien still remembered that many days ago, during the battle for the flag on White Moon Mountain, she had fought with Leiho. At that time, the situation had been urgent. She had felt a trace of unnaturalness, but she couldn't think too much about it. Afterwards, she had thrown the matter to the back of her mind. Seeing Leiho today, it had brought back the memories of that day's fight. But she still couldn't think of a conclusion. What was unnatural about it? Liang Ping urged her fiercely. Hien got up and went to the weapons rack to get her spear. She thought to herself, forget it. In any case, we're both in the Liang Province Guard. If it really doesn't work out, I'll find another opportunity to fight with Leiho in a few days. However, before Hien could fight with Leiho, she received news that Xiao Ju was leaving. The Liang Province Guard received an urgent report that the citizens of Zhangtai City, which was thousands of li away from Liang Province, had been harassed by the Yudo. As soon as the Yudo arrived, they would steal money and food and bully men and women. The Zhangtai County Magistrate was miserable beyond words. He could only ask Xiao Ju for help. He asked Xiao Ju to lead the troops to expel these Yudo. The Yudo country had bowed its head to the Dawei long before the previous emperor had been on the throne, paying tribute every year. However, ever since the current emperor ascended the throne, the Yudo had been restless. After the Southern Barbarian and Western Chang rebellions had been quelled, the Yudo had also been quiet for a period of time. However, for some reason, they had become more aggressive and dared to directly harass the citizens of the border. The emperor was magnanimous and turned a blind eye to the Yudo's actions. In addition, there was Prime Minister Su's faction in the court that supported peace, so the other generals did not dare to take on this hot potato. It was probably because of this that the Zhangtai County magistrates sought help from Xiao Ju in Liang Province. Commander-in-Chief, when are we leaving? The military instructors were all standing in Xiao Ju's room. He was sitting at the spot where Cheng Li Su usually wrote. The door was not closed, so they did not avoid He Yin from talking about this matter. However, there was nothing to hide. It would take a month to travel to and from Zhangtai. If Xiao Ju was not there, it would be noticed. Tomorrow. So early? Liang Ping was surprised. But the army has not had time to tell the vanguard. No need, Xiao Ju said. I don't plan on bringing them. The instructors looked at each other, but Yin was not surprised. Even though the new recruits of the Liang Province Guard had been training for more than half a year, they had never been on the battlefield. Rushing to Zhangtai after a long journey and then fighting with the Wutuo people in Zhangtai was not the best plan. It would consume too much energy, and the Yudo was cunning and brutal. The new soldiers might not be a match for them. After thinking about it, Xiao Ju's Nanfu soldiers were the most suitable. If Xiao Ju brought the new soldiers to Liang Province, the Nanfu soldiers should be stationed somewhere else. With the military power in his hands, it was perfectly justifiable for him to lead the soldiers there. If he received good news, the emperor would be happy and reward him with something. She could also follow him and become an immortal. Thinking about this, he nodded secretly. He felt that Xiao Ju's decision was very good. He also told the military instructors what they needed to pay attention to in the coming days. When it was late at night, they all left. Xiao Ju stood up from the table and walked to the door. He reached out to lock the door. Unexpectedly, someone blocked him from behind. Ian's head poked out from behind the door. "What are you doing?" he asked. Ian did not let him close the door. He tilted his head and looked at him. "Commander-in-Chief, are you leaving tomorrow?" Xiao Ju ignored him and closed the door. Ian's body was half stuck in the door. He could not close it, so he simply ignored it and walked into the room. Ian easily crossed the door and entered his room. He followed behind him and asked politely, "Commander-in-Chief, have you thought about bringing me with you to Zhangtai?" "You?" Xiao Ju sneered. "Why would I bring you? Do you think there are not enough people holding us back?" In this person's eyes, perhaps everyone other than him was a burden. "You are underestimating me. I can help you deal with the Yudo." "Forget it." He looked her up and down and raised his eyebrows. "A bodyguard can injure you, and you still want to talk about fighting the Yudo. Lady He, you are dreaming. Last time was a special situation. Ding, he is not an ordinary person." Yin defended himself, but he knew that Xiao Ju was right. Her injuries had not healed yet. These days, she was very careful even when she was training. She was afraid that it would affect her injuries. If she followed him to Zhangtai, she might cause trouble on the battlefield. Moreover, she couldn't use her expertise in arranging troops. In a troop, it was enough to have one main general. "Okay," Ian said with some regret. Suddenly, he thought of something and looked at Xiao Ju. "Commander-in-Chief, it will take a month to go to Zhangtai and back. Plus, you will fight the Yudo. I am afraid that when you come back, it will be late winter. My wounds have mostly healed, so what else can I do for the next few days? Even if it is 3 times daily training, you won't deny it if I do it when you're not here, right?" Or, she stared at Xiao Ju suspiciously. "You want to use the battle in Zhangtai to escape? Don't tell me you don't want to go back to the Liang Province Guard? You want to leave me here alone?" Xiao Ju stopped tidying up the books on the table and turned around. Yin, who was looking up at her, was shocked. His eyes fell on Yan's face. He lowered his head and said, "First, I am not as bored as you. Second, you're not my fiancée. I don't want to leave you here alone. Third, I'm not here. Isn't that what you want?" "What do you mean by what I want?" Yin said, "Don't accuse me wrongly." He stared at Yin with a faint smile. His dark eyes were deep. He asked, "Oh, then why are you asking so much? Is it important when I will come back, or if I will come back?" "Of course it is important." He blurted out. "I will miss you." How could she not miss him? The more outstanding she was in front of Xiao Ju and won Xiao Ju's favor and trust, the faster and more aboveboard she could approach He Rufei as an equal. He was a living bodhisattva. How could she not miss him? Xiao Ju seemed to be surprised by her words. She turned her head and said, "You really can say anything. Don't call me a liar. Other than my identity, I have never lied to you. What I said just now is true. Won't you miss me when we are apart?" Xiao Ju said, "No, I won't." He said, "We have been through life and death together. You don't have to be so heartless." Xiao Ju asked, "Are you done? If you are, please go back to your room. I'm going to lock the door." He grabbed Ian's shoulder and pushed Ian towards the door. "Commander, sometimes I feel that our identities have been reversed. You are so guarded against me. It is as if you are the woman and I will sully your innocence. You talk too much." Ian's legs were stuffed into her room. She knew that this person really did not want her to stay in the room. She took advantage of the fact that her upper body could still move and quickly took out a handful of things and stuffed them into Xiao Ju's hands. Bang! The door was slammed shut. Ian said through the door, "Although you are so heartless, I am still a righteous person. I have nothing to send you off to Zhantai. Here, I will give you these. Eat them slowly on the way. I will wait for your good news at the guard station." Then, without waiting for a reply, he went to bed, blew out the lamp, and went to sleep. On the other side of the door, Xiao Ju lowered her head and looked at her palm. It was a handful of sweet persimmon candy wrapped in a thin layer of pastry paper. Just by looking at it, she felt that it was fragrant and sweet. Song Tao Tao and Chung Li were the same. Ever since they came to the Liang Province Guard Station, they would send small gifts every few days. She loved sweets, so she asked Chi Wu to go to the city and buy a lot. She also gave some to Hien. Hien thought that Xiao Ju always carried the sachet of osmanthus candy with him when he was young. It was true that he loved sweets. Last time, he did not want to eat the candied haws that she bought for him. It was probably because she bought it from a street vendor in the city. Second young master, Xiao, did not want to eat these kinds of roadside snacks. However, this handful of sweet persimmon candy was made by Song Tao Tao and Chi Wu at a proper restaurant. This should be able to please Xiao Ju. He could not possibly refuse to eat this. That would be too picky. Hopefully, he would understand the principle of giving candy in return for a plum. Hien woke up the next day and went to the practice field for day training. When it was almost noon and lunchtime, Chung Li ran over. In order not to see Song Tao Tao, he had moved to the shared room that Hien used to live in. Everyone thought that he would not be able to hold on for long. They did not think that he would be able to hold on until now. However, compared to the room he used to live in, it was much simpler. It was difficult for him to maintain his elegant appearance. His face had lost a lot of weight, and he had forgotten to match his hairband with his clothes. He panted as he ran in front of Hien. Hien was drinking wild vegetable soup and was almost knocked down by Chung Li Su. Hien asked, "What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry?" "My uncle," Chung Li said. "Big brother, my uncle has left." "I know." "You know." Chung Li was stunned. He then said angrily, "Then why didn't you tell me? If Shun Jiaodo did not tell me today, I would not have realized that he had already left." "He has already left?" Hien was also slightly surprised. When she woke up in the morning, she did not pay attention to Xiao Ju. She thought that Xiao Ju would leave later. She did not expect him to leave so early. He probably did not want to disturb anyone else. Why did he not take Song Tao Tao with him when he left? Chung Li began to complain. Who was he trying to make trouble for by staying in the Liang Province Guard? Hien was speechless. Logically speaking, Song Tao Tao was such a delicate and cute little girl. Young men would be eager to please her. Chung Li actually avoided her like a snake or scorpion. What kind of taste did this child have? She asked, "What did Song Tao Tao do to you?" "I think she's also sensible and well-behaved." "Big brother, please forgive me," Chung Li said bitterly. "When I first found out about this marriage, I wanted to sneak a peek. Who knew that I would run into her? I don't know how she guessed my identity. She scolded me at the door." "Scolded you for what? What else could it be?" You are not good at literature or martial arts. You are a good-for-nothing with no future. That is fine. Everyone in Shuo City knows that I am incompetent. If it was just that, I would not be so angry. However, she later said that it is fine to marry me, but I must study hard at home and pass the imperial examinations. In the future, when I enter an official's career, I must strive to reach the top. If it is really difficult to study, I can also take the path of the military examination. In the end, I must be a hard-working person. How can there be such a vicious woman in this world? Speaking of this matter, Chung Lisu's resentment soared to the sky. My beloved miss must also be like me, not fighting for other people's business, free and unrestrained, free from the dust of the world, enjoying wine together, making fun together, just like me. If I really get together with her, what is the difference between spending the rest of my life in prison? Therefore, big brother, don't say anything good about her. I am really scared and do not want to live that kind of life. Ian did not know what to say, even if he wanted to persuade him. Sometimes, when two people interacted, love at first sight was one thing, and not getting tired of each other was another. You hoped that he would be determined and hardworking, but he would yearn for the clouds and wild crane. They were not the same type of people, but they wanted to be together. Even if it was hard to notice at the time would tell. In her previous life, she did not understand the principles that she did not understand in her entire life. She was not as clear as the two children. If you really don't like her, then think of a way to cancel the engagement. You don't have to be so picky about her. Being friends is good enough. Ian thought for a moment before speaking. Forget it. Chung Lisu waved his hand, as if he did not want to talk about it. I really can't be friends with her. Our views are different. Ian changed the topic and asked Chung Lisu if he wanted to move to Xiao Ju's room, since Xiao Ju had left. Chung Lisu unexpectedly refused and only said that he wanted to be as far away from Song Taodao as possible. It was as if he was avoiding the plague. When the day's training ended, Ian returned to his room. After washing up, he stared blankly at the locked door. Although Xiao Ju usually didn't talk to her much, she knew that he was just a door away from her. Once he left, he really felt that he was the only one in the huge room. It was very lonely. Suddenly, he missed the time when he lived with Xiao Mai and the others in the shared bunk. At that time, he would not feel bored listening to their idle conversations. If it was too quiet, he would not be able to sleep. If he could not sleep, it would be easy for his imagination to run wild. Ian sat up from the couch and thought for a moment. He got up, put on his shoes, walked to the door, and took out a silver strand from his sleeve. This silver strand was from Chung Lisu's hairpin. The hairpin was made into a yellow carp, and the silver strand was the carp's beard. It was very cute. The first time Ian saw it, he touched it a little too hard and directly pulled the beard off. Chung Lisu said that it was okay and that she could just throw it away. Ian felt a little distressed and thought that he might be able to sell it for tea, so he put it away. At this time, she took out the curly silver strand and straightened it. She stretched it out through the crack of the door and put her ear on the door, listening carefully. This was a unique skill that a craftsman taught her when she was in the military camp. That craftsman was a locksmith. Sometimes when a big family's ancestors are accidentally dug out a locked box, they would go to him to open it. He was quite famous in his hometown. Later, when the city captured strong men and conscripted them, the locksmith hid his children and grandchildren and did it himself. Ian still remembered that the locksmith was a little old. When he smiled, he was missing an incisor, which was a little funny. Ian and his grandson were about the same age, so Ian hit it off with him. He even taught Ian a few lockpicking moves. The locksmith had already died in the Battle of Mo County, but Ian still remembered the lockpicking skills. That locksmith knew how to open the shaped locks used by officials and nobles, and the G-shaped locks used for weddings and celebrations. However, he only taught Ian the shaped locks used by commoners. He probably thought that one day, if he could return to his hometown and go back to his old profession, he could still make a living with his skills. He couldn't teach his disciple and starve his master, who knew that in the end, he didn't succeed. Ian tried to open the lock with a fluke. Fortunately, the door in Xiao Ju and Chung Lisu's room was exactly the E-shaped door. However, In a moment, there was a kacha sound, and the door on the other side was opened. Ian gently pushed, and the door opened. The moonlight fell on the desk in front of the window. The window wasn't closed, so the shadows of the trees outside swayed slightly and fell on the ground like water plants in a pond. Ian tiptoed in and stood still after entering. She didn't know why she did such a thing and was annoyed for a moment. If someone was hiding in the dark, they would probably think that she was a thief. She wasn't here to steal anything, and it wasn't her first time in Xiao Ju's room. She opened the door because she couldn't sleep and was bored to death. However, since she was already here, it would be a pity to leave now. Ian looked around and saw that Xiao Ju's drinking sword wasn't hanging on the wall. There were 2 or 3 books scattered on the table. Ian leaned over to take a look and saw that they were all military books. He didn't take his guqin and hid it to the side. Under the moonlight, it glowed like a rare treasure. Xiao Ju's room wasn't very luxurious. In fact, compared to Cheng Li Su's complex room, it was a bit too simple, so much so that it felt a bit bleak. However, Ian remembered that second young master Xiao used to be very particular when he was at Xianchangwan. The room that he lived in was even more luxurious than Shibao's room. The floor was covered with a blanket, and it didn't feel cold at all in the winter. He seemed to be afraid of the cold. When the weather turned cold, he would always wear brocade clothes and a fox fur coat. However, this room was cold and not as warm as it used to be. What did he go through all these years to become the commander-in-chief of the Right Army? Ian thought about it and unknowingly walked to the table. Her fingers touched something, and she looked down. She saw that beside the pen holder, there was a handful of colorful granules. She picked them up and looked at them under the moonlight. They were the persimmon gummies that she had stuffed into Xiao Ju's hands yesterday. The gummies had been outside for a long time and were not as soft as before. The sweet smell also seemed to have faded a lot. Ian counted them. Not a single one was missing. He didn't touch them and just left them here. He didn't try 1 or 2 and didn't bring them a zhang tai. Why was that? Even if it was because he thought that the candied gummies were too crude or because of second young Master Zhao's pride, it was fine if he didn't want them. These gummies were made by a pastry chef in a restaurant in the city. Although they weren't delicacies, they were definitely not crude. She had stuffed them into Xiao Ju's hands and closed the door last night. No one saw whether Xiao Ju had taken them or not and what his reaction was. However, if he really liked sweets, he wouldn't have left them here. She could almost see him casually throwing the gummies on the table and not even looking at her. Was he afraid that she had poisoned them? Or had Xiao Ju's taste changed over the years? There was no answer to this question. Ian pondered. Suddenly, she felt something sweep across her face, bringing with it a slight coolness and moisture. It was furry. She looked up and saw salt-like things fluttering down from the outside, flying with the wind to the front of the table. It was late at night, and the sound of bamboo breaking could be heard. She took 2 steps forward. Through the window, she could see the towering Mount Baiyue in the distance. The moonlight was cold and distant, falling on the wilderness and dancing with the snow in front of her eyes. "It's snowing," she said quietly in her heart. It turned out that the winter snow of the Liang province guards had arrived so early. Chapter 107. It was winter, and the weather was very cold. Winter in Liangzhou was colder than the capital. During the day, it was still okay, as they could warm their bodies during training. However, at night, it was extremely cold. The amount of firewood in the basin was far from enough. The number of soldiers who went to Wulu River to bathe also decreased. They all went to boil water to bathe themselves. Ian was the same. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Ju had been gone for more than half a month. She estimated that Xiao Ju should have reached Zhangtai by now. However, the instructors did not talk about this on a daily basis. Ian also did not know the situation in Zhangtai. She still trained with the new soldiers every day. However, because her body was not fully recovered, she could not follow Xiao Ju's triple daily training. On this day, Ian and the new soldiers were training in the martial arts field. When it was almost evening, the training ended. Ian talked to Hong Shan and a few others. Hong Shan rubbed his hands and blew into his palms. "Hey, do you feel that it is too cold these few days?" "It's okay." Yin replied. When she was in the Fuyue army, she had fought in the winter near the river. The tents were set up by the river. At night, the wind was biting cold and there was no firewood to burn. The soldiers slept together at night to ward off the cold. That was what it meant to be truly cold. You young people can withstand the cold. Hong Shan sighed and looked in the direction of Baiyue Mountain. Why does it snow in Liangzhou every day? It lasts for an entire night. Yin followed his gaze. Baiyue Mountain in winter was not as green as it was in summer. At a glance, the mountain was covered in white snow. The new soldiers went up the mountain every few days to chop firewood. They could not go further up the mountain. The higher they went, the thicker the snow. It was not safe. Actually, this weather is the best for hunting. Xiaomai came over and said, "Big brother and I used to soak food in wine during the day and throw it beside the cave. There was nothing to eat during the winter. We ate rabbits and foxes when we saw them. When we went out at night, there was prey all over the ground. It was effortless and simple. The White Moon Mountain is so big, there should be a lot of rabbits and foxes." He licked his lips. "Stop," he urged. "I think you'd better give up on this idea. The terrain on the mountain is complicated and the snow is thick. Don't become a rabbit before the rabbit is hunted." "He really looks down on us," Xiaomai muttered. As they were talking, they saw a group of new recruits coming down from the end of the horse path that led from the martial arts practice field to Mount Baiyue. Walking in the middle was the female doctor, Shun Muxiue. She was wearing a moon-white coat and skirt, with an apricot-colored long cloak embroidered with plum blossoms draped over her shoulders. Her hair tie was also plain white. As she slowly walked out of the snow-colored sky, she looked even more beautiful and fairy-like. Hong Shan stared blankly at her and said, "I can't believe there is such a woman in the world. She's so beautiful and kind-hearted. On such a cold day, a weak woman went up the mountain to gather medicine for the injured. Only a fairy could be so compassionate." Finally, he asked Yin, "Don't you think so?" Yin said, "That's right. Every few days, the new recruits took turns going up the mountain to gather firewood. Shimushue would also go with them. There were some medicinal herbs on the mountain that could be found during the winter. There was a shortage of medicinal herbs in the garrison, especially during the winter. Some of the soldiers caught a cold, and it was difficult for them to recover in a short time. Shinmushue ordered someone to boil some medicinal concoction to expel the cold. She filled a wooden bucket with the concoction and gave everyone a bowl. After drinking the concoction, it would be hot and sweaty. It was very good for the body. She didn't look as sturdy as Yin. She was gentle and weak. It was very rare for her to be able to go up the mountain with the new recruits on such a cold day. "Who's the recruit behind her?" Sure Tu asked with a frown. Everyone looked over and saw that the recruit behind Shinmushue had a person lying on his back. This person wasn't wearing a uniform, so it was obvious that he wasn't a recruit from the Liang Province Guards. They hadn't said anything yet, but curious recruits had already rushed over to find out what was going on. Not long after, some of the recruits who heard the news came back and told their companions what was going on. Ian listened carefully and heard someone say, "That person is a hunter from the other side of the mountain. His family is so poor that they don't have enough food to eat, so he took the risk to come up the mountain to hunt. In the end, he was trapped by the snow. When Miss Shun and the others met this person, half of his body was buried in the snow. We had to dig him out of the snow and come back half alive. Then he's really lucky. Mount Baiyue is unusually cold. If he had stayed for a few more minutes, even the gods wouldn't have been able to save him." "Isn't that so?" Xiaomai muttered. "Going up the mountain in this weather, he really doesn't want to live. There's nothing we can do about it. The lives of poor people aren't fortune tellers. His family doesn't even have money to eat, so how can he care about other things?" Hong Shan sighed. After watching for a while, the crowd dispersed. However, this matter was not over. At night, Chung Lisu came back and said that she wanted to stay in Xiaoju's room. Yin asked curiously, "Didn't you refuse to move back?" Chung Lisu frowned and said, "Today, the person that Dr. Shun saved is staying in our room, so I was kicked out. I can't let him stay in Uncle's room. When Uncle comes back, he'll beat me to death. Forget it. I'll reluctantly stay here for a few days. After he leaves, I'll move back." "Brother he, can you accompany me back to get the boxes tomorrow? I can't move them alone. Of course, but I'm afraid that you won't be staying here for a few days. It'll be a long time. Ian shook his head. Why? Ian smiled and didn't answer. However, Chung Lisu soon knew why Ian said that. The next day, after the day training, Ian accompanied Chung Lisu back to get the boxes in the shared room. They just so happened to run into Shun Mushue, who was applying medicine to the hunter they saved yesterday. Ian looked at her hands. Other than some medicine to replenish energy and medicine for frostbite, there was also some medicine for external injuries. Ian asked, Miss Shun, is that person injured? There are wild beasts in the forest. He encountered a bear and was attacked by it. When he was trying to avoid it, he fell off the cliff and was buried in the snow. There are some external injuries. Chung Lisu asked, then his injuries are very serious? Will he have to stay in the Liang province guard for a long time? It'll be a long time before I can move back. Young Master Chung, Shinmushu said helplessly. Even if his injuries are healed, he can't leave the Liang province guard for now. He came from the other side of the mountain. Right now, Bayou Mountain is sealed off by the snow. I'm afraid that he'll have to wait for the snow to melt or for sunny days before he can go up. If we let him go back now, he will only freeze to death on the mountain again. When Xing Lisu heard this, she almost jumped up. Then won't we have to wait an entire winter? When second young master comes back, perhaps there will be another way. Shin Mushue comforted her. Ian noticed that when Shun Mushue said Xiao Ju, he didn't call him commander-in-chief, but second young master. It wasn't a master-servant relationship. Instead, it seemed like they were very familiar with each other. While he was thinking, they arrived in front of the room. There was no one else in the room at the moment. After training in the practice field, everyone had gone to eat and rest. Ian used to lie on the edge of the wall, but now there was another person lying down. He wore a thin shirt and wrapped the blanket tightly around him. He seemed to be very cold. Shin Mushue placed a medicine tray on the table and turned around to call him. Hu Yuanzhong? When the person lying on the bed heard this, the blanket moved slightly. After a moment, he supported himself on the bed with both hands and slowly sat up. He was a man about 30 years old. His skin was dark, and his lips were cracked to the point that they were peeling. He looked a little thin and weak. He lifted the blanket and looked at Shun Mushue. He said hurriedly, Dr. Shun, you should change your dressing. Shun Mushue said, sit by the bed and roll up your trousers. The man called Hu Yuanzhong looked even more nervous. He rubbed his hands and stammered. How can I trouble a female doctor? I'll do it myself. He bent down. As soon as he moved, he hissed in pain. When Shun Mushue saw this, he squatted down in front of Hu Yuanzhong and helped him roll up his trousers. Sure enough, there were scars all over his legs. They were probably caused by the rocks and branches on the mountain. It's not done yet. Shun Mushue said, I'll apply more medicine today. Hu Yuanzhong nodded blankly. Let me do it. At this moment, Yan's voice interrupted. Before Shin Mushue could react, she reached out and took the medicine from Shun Mushue's hands. She squatted down and said, Miss Shun, please get up first. This, Hu Yuanzhong was a little surprised. This little brother, my name is Yin. The bed you're sleeping on now is mine. Miss Shun is a girl after all. It's not convenient for you. I'll apply medicine for brother Hu. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Yin smiled and looked at Hu Yuanzhong. Hu Yuanzhong sighed in relief. Of course, I don't want to trouble Dr. Shun. Yin, stop fooling around. Shin Mushue frowned slightly. There's no difference between men and women in front of doctors. You don't know how to apply medicine. I know how to apply medicine. Dr. Shun, don't be nervous. You should take a look at Chung Lisu first. I saw that he was coughing this morning. I don't want him to catch a cold. Chung Lisu said, That's right, Dr. Shun. I feel that my throat is a little dry. Shin Mushue was stunned. He said, Really? Then he stood up and said to Chung Lisu, Come outside with me. I'll take a look at him first. The two of them left. Only Hu Yuanzhong and Yin were left in the room. Yin first helped him clean up the blood that had seeped out from his leg, then applied a thin layer of medicine on his wound. He asked, Big brother Hu, your injury is a bit serious. Does it hurt a lot? It's okay. Hu Yuanzhong said, It's just some external injuries. Although he said that, he said it through gritted teeth. It looked like it was very difficult for him to speak. He stopped what he was doing and used a little more force. Hu Yuanzhong cried out in pain. I'm sorry, Brother Hu. Yin was embarrassed. I wasn't careful. It's okay, it's okay. Dr. Shun is still the most attentive. I'm a big man and clumsy. I've hurt Brother Hu. Brother Hu, please don't mind. Hu Yuanzhong forced a smile and said, Don't say that. Yin smiled and lowered his head to continue applying medicine. He snorted coldly in his heart. Just now, she saw clearly that although Hu Yuanzhong refused to apply the medicine himself, he cried out in pain as soon as he moved. When Shun Muxue squatted down, Hu Yuanzhong's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. Although he hid it very well, Yin still saw it. She hated this kind of person who was lustful. Shun Muxue saved Hu Yuanzhong's life. Hu Yuanzhong had dirty thoughts about his savior. What kind of person was this? When he pulled up Hu Yuanzhong's trousers, Yin could clearly see these so-called serious injuries. They looked messy and serious, but in fact, they were all external injuries. Yin, a girl, could not make a sound when she suffered more serious injuries. If this person was so poor that he risked his life to go up the mountain to hunt, he would not be so delicate. When a person was so hungry that they could not afford to eat, how would they have the mind to rack their brains for dirty thoughts? With just a few words, one could see Hu Yuanzhong's character. Shun Muxue was kind and pure. He was also a doctor who treated patients, so he did not care about these tricks. Yin, on the other hand, saw everything clearly as a bystander. He only felt uncomfortable in his heart. Big Brother Hu, what are your plans after you recover? Yin asked. Hu Yuanzhong scratched his head. I haven't thought about it yet. Why don't you stay in Liangzhou Guards? Soldiers have enough to eat. You won't starve, Yin joked. That's good too, Hu Yuanzhong said with a silly smile. He actually said that was good too? This time, Yin was even more surprised. She was just casually teasing him, but Hu Yuanzhong actually agreed. He didn't even say anything like, this is too embarrassing. It could be seen that, firstly, he didn't feel grateful. Secondly, he never thought about his future plans. A person who did not know what the future held should always be worrying about what to do in the future. How could he be so careless? Yin was instantly displeased. Could it be that Hu Yuanzhong wanted to rely on the Liangzhou Guards to take advantage of Shun Muxue all the time? Thinking of this, Yin quickly applied the medicine on Hu Yuanzhong's wound. She passed a bowl of medicine to him and said, Big Brother Hu, drink the medicine first. Hu Yuanzhong reached out to take it. Thank you. He drank the medicine rather quickly. He straightened his neck and gulped down the medicine. Then, he passed the bowl back to Yin. Yin reached out to take it. He saw that Hu Yuanzhong's outstretched hand was covered in red rashes from the web between his thumb and index finger to the inside of his wrist. Yin paused. Hu Yuanzhong noticed Yin's movements and asked, What's wrong with Brother He? Big Brother Hu, do you want a female doctor to take a look at the rashes on your hand? Yin asked. Did you get on the mountain too? Hu Yuanzhong was stunned. He rubbed his wrist twice and smiled. No need. It should subside in a few days. It's not a serious illness. There's no need to trouble a female doctor. If that's the case, Yin nodded and smiled. Then it's nothing. She stared at Hu Yuanzhong and didn't say anything for a while. Hu Yuanzhong also felt strangely uncomfortable. He touched his face and asked, Brother He, is there something on my face? No. Yin smiled and shook his head. I'll take the empty bowl out first. Although Miss Shun is a doctor, she's still a girl. I have nothing to do these few days, so I'll run errands for Miss Shun. I'll take care of Big Brother, Hu's wound medicine. He pretended not to see the disappointment in Hu Yuanzhong's eyes and turned to leave. When he left, Shun Muxue was telling Chung Lisu to stick out her tongue. Seeing Yin come out, he asked suspiciously, so fast. There weren't many wounds to begin with. Yin asked, How's Chung Lisu? I ate too much spicy food these few days. My throat is smoking. Chung Lisu was embarrassed. It's nothing serious. Then it's fine. You can go back. Yin returned the medicine tray to Shun Muxue and said to Shun Muxue, I've already discussed it with Big Brother Hu. I'll take care of Big Brother Hu's wound medicine these few days. From tomorrow onwards, I'll come to Miss Shun's room every day at this time to take the medicine and send it to Big Brother Who. Miss Shun won't have to make another trip. Shinmushiwe was still a little hesitant. Then it's settled. Take it as my thanks for the box of scar removal and muscle revitalization ointment that Miss Shun gave me. He put his arm around Chung Lisu's shoulder. Then we'll go first. And Chung Lisu walked away. On the way, Chung Lisu asked him, Big Brother, what's wrong? What? He came back to his senses. After you came out of Hu Yuanzhong's room, you stopped talking. What happened in the room just now? Did you two have a fight? No. He took 2 steps and thought for a while. He stopped and said to Chung Lisu, you go back first. I have something to talk to Hong Shan about. But you haven't eaten anything yet. I'll go get 2 steam buns. He waved his hand. You go back first and wait for me. See you later. Hong Shan and Xiao Mai were eating porridge. When they saw Hien, they made room for him and said, Why are you so late today? I thought you weren't coming. I had something to do on the way here. Hien took a steam bun, but he didn't wolf it down like he usually did. He only took a bite and stopped. After a long time, he said, Brother Shan, sure too. I have something that I need your help with. Why are you so serious? Hong Shan put down the bowl in his hand. What do you need our help with? The hunter that Dr. Shun rescued from the mountains yesterday, Hu Yuanzhong. He's in your room now, right? Hien said, for the next few days, you have to train during the day. Can you help me keep an eye on him at night? Hong Shan and Shi too looked at each other. Hong Shan asked, Why don't I understand what you're saying? What's wrong with Hu Yuanzhong? Why do you want to keep an eye on him? I think there's something wrong with him. This time, even Xiao Mai didn't have time to eat. The atmosphere was solemn for a moment. Shi too asked in a low voice, What's wrong? Maybe I'm thinking too much. I'm not sure yet, but I think that maybe it's not a coincidence that he was rescued from the mountains by Dr. Shun. Upon hearing this, Hong Shan's eyes widened. A spy? Keep your voice down, Hien said. I'm just suspicious. That's why I need you to keep an eye on him. See if he does anything unusual at night. No. Hong Shan still felt incredulous. You have to tell us what's wrong with him that made you suspect him. Hien took a deep breath and said, I'll tell you in a few days. For now, I just need your help to keep an eye on him. I hope I'm thinking too much, she said softly. At night, after parting ways with Hong Shan and the others, Hien returned to her room. After familiarizing herself with the place, she lay on the bed. She was full of worries and couldn't fall asleep. Meeting Hu Yuanzhong today was an accident. Who knew that in the end, it would upset her and make her feel uneasy. Hien didn't make up what she said to Hong Shan and the others. She did suspect that Hu Yuanzhong was a spy who had infiltrated the Liangzhou guards for other purposes. As for how she found this suspicious point, it was because when she handed the medicine to Hu Yuanzhong today, when Hu Yuanzhong returned it, she saw a dense red rash that covered the area between his thumb and index finger to the inside of his wrist. It made her think of the Chong people. The place where the Chong people lived was covered in dense forests. The weather was humid all year round. When the Chong soldiers held swords, it was easy for them to get red rashes from the area between their thumb and forefinger to the wrist. When Hien was General Fei Hong, he had specially looked for military doctors to study the rashes. Even though the Chong people later entered the Central Plains, the rashes didn't disappear in a short period of time. Therefore, when she saw the rash between Hu Yuanzhong's thumb and forefinger, she immediately thought of the Chong soldiers without hesitation. However, she wasn't completely sure. All the rashes in the world looked the same. It could be caused by the humid weather, or it could be caused by touching sensitive objects. There was no need to suspect the other party because of a rash. However, it was probably because Hien had developed a habit of being cautious when he was a general, especially when it came to the Chong people. Or maybe it was because Hien had sensed Hu Yuanzhong's hidden feelings for Shinmushiwe and had a bad impression of him. Now, she immediately suspected him. Thinking about it carefully, there were indeed many suspicious points. For example, the snow on the mountain was so heavy. The other side of Mount Baiwe was shady, so the snow would only be deeper. The new recruits couldn't even cross this side. How did a Yuanzhong cross the other side alone? Since he said that his family was so poor that they didn't have any food to eat, why didn't he find a gentler way to do it? For example, he could help people move goods at the docks and do some manual labor. At least, he could temporarily resist the cold and hunger. One had to know that when hunting on Mount Baiwe, the best-case scenario was that he could hunt a wild beast to alleviate his urgent needs. However, there was a higher possibility that he would die on the mountain and lose both his wealth and life, leaving behind an easier path to take, and instead taking a seemingly inconceivably difficult path. This was not facing difficulties head-on. This was stupidity. Looking at how he pretended to cry out in pain to get Shan Mushiue to personally take care of him, he didn't seem like a stupid person. The more Yin thought about it, the more suspicious she felt. Unfortunately, Xiao Ju wasn't here, so she couldn't remind Xiao Ju. But even if Xiao Ju was here, she couldn't directly mention the most important point. The Chang tribe was thousands of li away from the capital. The new recruits of the Liangzhou guards couldn't have seen the Chang tribe soldiers. Even Xiao Ju might not have fought with the Chang tribe. He Yin was born in the capital, so how could she know the secret habits of the Chang tribe? She was afraid that if she said it, the first person to be suspected would not be Hu Yuanzhong, but herself. That year, she led the soldiers to quell the rebellion of Xichang. The commander of the Chang tribe, Ridamuji, died on the battlefield, and the rest of the Chang tribe surrendered. The next few years were peaceful. The Chang tribe was very peaceful, and there were no disturbances. But that didn't mean she could truly relax. If this really was a Chang person, an ordinary, unarmed, and defenseless commoner, how could he have just so happened to ascend White Moon Mountain on this type of snowy day? Moreover, he was even picked up by Shan Mushiue and entered the Liang Province Guards. If there were too many coincidences, then they wouldn't be coincidences anymore. Someone must have done it on purpose. Now that Xiao Ju wasn't here, if there really was a conspiracy, how could she deal with it? Xiao Ju wasn't here. Xiao Ju wasn't here? In an instant, He Yin sat up, and a terrifying thought flashed through her mind. Why did this person come when Xiao Ju wasn't here? Could it be that the call for help from Zhantai was also fake? Attack in the east, attack in the west. She had to memorize this rule in military books every day. How could she forget? At some point, the snow stopped. He Yin looked out the window. The wind outside was calm, and the snow covered the ground. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. But under this calm, there might be a shocking undercurrent, waiting for the right time to flood the heavens. Chapter 108. With so many things hidden in her heart, she couldn't sleep well at night. The next day, He Yin woke up before the sun rose. After the morning training, she went to talk to Hong Shan. Hong Shan said, "Yesterday, Sure too, and I took turns guarding him for half the night, but we didn't find anything wrong." He Yin looked at Sure too, and Sure too nodded at her. "Nothing happened the whole night." "No, he slept more deeply than we did." Hong Shan looked at He Yin suspiciously. "You're thinking too much. Hu Yuanzhong is just an ordinary hunter. I don't think there's anything wrong with what he said. His family is so poor, it's quite pitiful. Eigo, what's wrong with him? Why are you so suspicious of him?" Xiao Mai asked curiously. "What's wrong?" "In the end, it's just a rash between the thumb and index finger and wrist. It's not a big problem. It's just that he picked the time when Xiao Ju went out, which made her feel that something was wrong. She had been on the edge of life and death on the battlefield too many times. Sometimes the body can make more direct judgments than the brain. One of the old generals she followed often said, "Ordinary people's intuition may be wrong, but people like us, when it comes to danger, most of the time, it's true." She pondered for a moment and said, "Let me take a look." Hong Shan shrugged and didn't ask any more questions. In the evening, all the day training was over. He Yin went to Shin Mushiue's room to get some medicine, and then went to find Hu Yuanzhong. Hu Yuanzhong was alone in the room, looking down at a piece of paper. When He Yin pushed the door open, he immediately hid the paper in his arms. "Brother Hu, what are you doing in the room alone?" He Yin pretended not to see his actions and asked with a smile. "Nothing." Hu Yuanzhong sighed. "My leg hasn't recovered, so I can't get out of bed. I can only stay in the room. Sorry for the trouble." "It's no trouble at all," He Yin said with a smile. You're so badly injured. Of course you need to recuperate. She helped Hu Yuanzhong roll up his trousers and squatted down to apply medicine. Yesterday, she didn't look carefully. Today, since she came with doubts, she looked very carefully. Both of the hunter's legs were covered with scars. The biggest one was probably caused by Shirtu. It was so deep that the bones could be seen. It was also the most serious one. I heard from Miss Shun that big brother who encountered a bear when he went up the mountain. Ian casually asked, "Are there still bears in this season?" The bears of the White Moon Mountain were probably hibernating during the day. It was not easy for Hu Yuanzhong to bump into one. Yeah, Hu Yuanzhong scratched his head. I was unlucky. I didn't find the fox, but met the bear first. Ian shook his head. How can you say that he's unlucky? Not everyone can escape unscathed after encountering a bear. I heard that bears don't have good eyesight, but they are very sensitive to smells. Big brother, who was injured and covered in blood, but the bear didn't chase after you. Big brother, who is already very strong. Also, Ian didn't look at Hu Yuanzhong's expression. His hands didn't stop moving as he continued. Big brother, who was buried in the snow. It was also very coincidental that Miss Shun rescued him. Our Liang Province Guard recruits only go up the mountain once every 3 to 5 days. If Big Brother, who had gone up the mountain one day later, or if he had fallen in the wrong place, I'm afraid he wouldn't be in the Liang Province Guard right now. Hu Yuanzhong was stunned. He nodded and said, "That's true. This is all thanks to Miss Shun." Ian smiled slightly. After applying the medicine, he helped Hu Yuanzhong pull down his trousers and handed over the bowl of medicine. When Hu Yuanzhong took the bowl of medicine, Yan's gaze fell on his wrist. He had pulled his sleeve a little longer, but he could still faintly see a patch of red between his thumb and index finger. How long has Big Brother, who been a hunter? Hu Yuanzhong drank the medicine as he said, 7 or 8 years. Have you always hunted on White Moon Mountain? She asked very quickly. Hu Yuanzhong hesitated for a moment before saying, yes. Then in the past few years, have you ever gone up White Moon Mountain on snowy days like this? No, never. Why did you go up again this year? It's really because I didn't have enough food to fill my stomach. Hu Yuanzhong drank the last mouthful of medicine and looked strangely at Yan. Brother He, why are you asking this? Yan lowered his head and smiled. I'm just a bit curious. She reached out to take the empty bowl in Hu Yuanzhong's hand. Hu Yuanzhong reached out his hand. When Yan's hand reached out to Hu Yuanzhong, it suddenly changed direction and chopped directly at Hu Yuanzhong's face. Hu Yuanzhong couldn't dodge in time and could only retreat to the side in panic. Yan's hand struck his chest. The latter screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, the young man didn't stop at all. He directly reached into Hu Yuanzhong's lapel and took out a piece of paper. Get back to me, Hu Yuanzhong shouted. However, because of Yan's slap just now, his voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears. Half of his body was lying on the couch, and he reached out to Yan in vain. The movement was so loud that it alarmed the people around. The surrounding recruits heard the noise and ran in. As soon as they came in, they saw Hu Yuanzhong clutching his chest and spitting out blood. Yan stood beside the couch with a piece of paper in his hand. What happened? What happened? Hu Yuanzhong said with difficulty. He took my things. What did you take from him? The recruit asked. Yan lowered his head and looked at the yellow paper in his hand. There was a poem written on the yellow paper. My heart is like the water of the West River, day and night flowing east without rest. The handwriting was beautiful. At first glance, it was obvious that it was written by a woman. What is this? Yan frowned and asked him. Hu Yuanzhong stared at him. He was furious and didn't say anything. What happened? Shen Mushue's voice came from behind. She happened to be nearby. She heard the noise and came over. What she saw was such a hostile scene. Yan. She looked at Yan suspiciously and then looked at Hu Yuanzhong, who was clutching his chest. She walked to Hu Yuanzhong's side and asked in surprise, why is your injury worse? Then she saw the blood on Hu Yuanzhong's lips. Who did this? Hu Yuanzhong stared at Yan. Shen Mushue frowned. Yan, what did you do? I just gave him a light slap. Yan smiled. I probably didn't control my strength well. Nonsense. He is still injured. How can he take your slap? Hu Yuanzhong struggled to get up and reached out a hand to He Yin. His tone was still angry. Give it back to me. He Yin shrugged his shoulders and returned the paper with the love poem to him. What is this? A recruit asked. What did you take from him? Shen Muxue also looked over. Hu Yuanzhong said sadly, this was written by my deceased wife. It was actually a relic of his deceased wife. He Yin, why did you take someone else's relic? A recruit couldn't stand it. No wonder he is so angry. I didn't know it was a relic. I was just playing with brother, Hu. He Yin said shamefully. Brother Hu won't be angry with me, right? Hu Yuanzhong looked at He Yin. He seemed to be angry but couldn't vent it. In the end, he had to endure it and said, it's okay. Don't do this kind of thing in the future. After that, he coughed violently again. He was extremely weak. Shen Muxue saw this scene, and his expression didn't look good. He only said to He Yin, forget it. He Yin, there is nothing for you to do here. You can leave first. I will still be responsible for Hu Yuanzhong's medicine. In the future, you don't have to come here every day. It was as if He Yin was the god of plague. Okay. He Yin wasn't angry and answered with a smile. He glanced at Hu Yuanzhong and turned to leave. As soon as he stepped out of the room, the smile on his face disappeared. Just now, she did it on purpose. When people are in danger, they will instinctively react. Just like when Ding Yi tested her in Liangzhou City to see if she was really blind. If Hu Yuanzhong wasn't as badly injured as he appeared to be, he would naturally counterattack. But he didn't and took He Yin's palm. If it was just that, it wouldn't be a big deal. But when He Yin launched that palm, he also deliberately took note of it. The palm that she gave Hu Yuanzhong looked fierce on the surface, but in reality, she didn't use much strength. At most, Hu Yuanzhong's flesh would hurt, but he definitely wouldn't bleed. After all, He Yin didn't want to kill anyone. If everything was just her thinking too much, wouldn't Hu Yuanzhong have suffered for nothing? Here was the problem. He Yin was very confident in her control of strength. How could such a harmless palm make Hu Yuanzhong vomit blood? If she didn't misjudge her strength, then this person was lying. He Yin thought that Hu Yuanzhong was lying. As for the love poem on the paper in his arms, it was even stranger. A person who carried his deceased wife's belongings with him was naturally a person with deep feelings. A person with deep feelings, when facing a beautiful female doctor, shouldn't have other thoughts. He Yin looked at all of this as if she was watching a lame play. Unfortunately, even if she was full of doubts, she couldn't tell anyone about this. She was afraid that if she told others that the palm just now was a fake, they would think that she was avoiding responsibility and deliberately said it lightly. This was indeed a bit troublesome. She walked and walked. Before long, Xiao Mai and the others followed her. When they saw her, they first let out a sigh of relief and said in a small voice, Hey go, they said you beat Hu Yuanzhong. Is it true? It had only been the time for a stick of incense to burn. How did the entire Liang province know? It's true. You're still suspicious of him? Hong Shan frowned and said, If you suspect that there's something wrong with him, we'll help you keep an eye on him. Why beat him up? Do you know that right now the entire Liang province guard is saying that you... He wanted to say something, but stopped. He Yin asked, What are they saying about me? They're saying that Ehigu is using your strength to bully the weak, arrogant, and despotic, Xiao Mai said. He Yin was silent. Things had become even stranger. Ehigu, what do we do now? Xiao Mai looked at him worriedly. Do you want to explain to the others? There's no need, He Yin said, narrowing his eyes. Since this person had spread the rumors so quickly, he must have come for her. Explaining would be futile. Compared to explaining these meaningless rumors, she was more suspicious of Hu Yuanzhong's goal and how she could expose this person's flaws. You guys continue to keep an eye on him at night, He Yin said. I'll keep watching. Xiao Mai and Hong Shan looked at each other, not saying anything else. Several days passed in a row. Everything was calm and peaceful. Nothing happened in the Liang province guard. Xiao Mai helped He Yin keep an eye on Hu Yuanzhong every day, but she didn't find any flaws. On the other hand, Hong Shan and the others didn't sleep well at night. During training the next day, they were absent-minded with dark circles under their eyes and were scolded by Liang Ping several times. As for He Yin, he wanted to personally see how Hu Yuanzhong was doing every day and see if he could get more information. However, Shun Mushue guarded against him like he was guarding against a thief. He strictly forbade He Yin from getting close to Hu Yuanzhong, fearing that He Yin would accidentally injure Hu Yuanzhong again while fooling around. Thus, after a few days, He Yin couldn't even touch Hu Yuanzhong's side, much less find any flaws. That night, He Yin walked to the training field alone. Because of his injury, He Yin changed his night training to once every 3 days. Xiao Ju had been gone for more than half a month, but there was no news at all. He Yin secretly asked Cheng Lisu if there was any news from Zhang Tai, but Cheng Lisu didn't know either. Originally, when Xiao Ju was here, he didn't think much of it. Now that he was gone, he felt that the Liang province guard couldn't do without him. Otherwise, if he revealed a little bit of this matter to Xiao Ju, with his mind, he would definitely be able to figure out what was going on. Now that she didn't even have someone to discuss this with, it was really difficult. She walked over to the crossbow and was about to practice when she heard movement from the other end of the horse path. She looked up and saw a black shadow riding a horse toward Mount Baiwei. It was the middle of the night. How could there be someone going up the mountain? However, the weather had been good these past few days, and the snow on the mountain had melted a little, so it was easier to travel than in the past few days. He Yin wanted to call for help, but the training field was too far away from the shared bunks where the new recruits lived. If he called for help, he wouldn't be able to catch up to this person. Seeing that person running farther and farther away and about to disappear into the darkness of the mountain forest, He Yin didn't care about anything else. He pulled out a horse from the stable, jumped onto it, and chased after the person. In the winter on Mount Baiwei, the soil was bitingly cold. Especially since the snow had melted, it was very easy for the horse to slip on the ground. The person in front of him didn't light a match and just moved forward under the starlight in the forest. He Yin also couldn't see clearly, so he followed and couldn't overtake the person. He Yin also knew the terrain of Mount Baiwei very well, so he looked for small paths to take. He wanted to lead He Yin into a ditch several times. However, He Yin had been here for many years, so he remembered the path much better than other people. Previously, he had been here once to fight for the flag, and then twice to chop firewood. He had already memorized the dangerous places, so he didn't fall for it. After a few times, that person realized that He Yin didn't fall for the bait, so he turned his horse around and went in a different direction. He Yin chased after him very closely. She suspected that this person was Hu Yuanzhong, but why did Hu Yuanzhong go up the mountain in the middle of the night? He couldn't have taken advantage of the dead of night when there was no one around to cross the mountain ridge and go home. One thing, if one could see too little, it would be difficult to deduce the whole picture. Since she couldn't deduce the whole picture, she didn't need to waste time. She just needed to find the source and ask clearly. She had to catch this person today. He Yin didn't take the small paths, so the road was much wider. He Yin urged his horse to catch up, and the distance between them was getting closer and closer. When there were only a few dozen feet between them, he jumped up and threw half of his body at the other person's horse. That person couldn't dodge in time and was forced to stop his horse, wanting to escape. He Yin pounced and fought with him. She had come and left in a hurry, so there was only an iron cudgel left on the weapon rack. He Yin casually took it, treating it as better than fighting with his bare hands. At this moment, that person jumped up. He Yin finally saw clearly that this person's face was covered, and his entire body was wrapped up tightly, only revealing a pair of eyes. His figure was similar to Hu Yuanzhong's, but the light was dim, so it was difficult to distinguish his identity from his eyes. He stood still, holding a large saber in his hand. The blade of the saber was like a crescent moon, flashing a biting cold light in the night. A scimitar? He Yin's heart beat wildly. The Chang soldiers loved to use scimitars because it was convenient to cut meat. Not only could it kill people, but it could also eat meat. He Yin had experienced the power of the scimitar before. She had seen a comrade hit by this scimitar, and his head fell to the ground before blood even flowed out. During the years when the Western Chang invaded the Central Plains, Commander Utamuji's favorite thing to do was to use the scimitar to cut off the captives' heads, string them together, and tie them to the tail of his beloved horse. Wherever he went, people were terrified. Now that she saw this scimitar, He Yin knew that this person was from the Chang tribe. She frowned. "Are you really from the Chang tribe?" Hearing this, that person laughed strangely, and his voice was hoarse. "How did you know?" "Cut the crap." Hien placed the iron cudgel on the ground and stared at him coldly. "Tell me, why did you sneak into the Liang province guards?" "Shoo." That person put his index finger to his lips and said, "Be quiet, so that we won't be discovered." He saw that Hien didn't say anything and seemed to be interested. He said again, "If you defeat me, I'll tell you." "Insolent," Hien reprimanded. As soon as she finished speaking, she pounced on that person. Although the iron cudgel was not as sharp as the scimitar, it was superior in its simplicity and toughness, making it difficult for people to get close to her. Hien was injured earlier, and her wounds were not fully healed, so her movements were restricted. Even so, she was evenly matched with this person. The masked person used the scimitar extremely well, so skillful that it was shocking. His attacks were also very ruthless, and every move was aimed at Hien's heart. Hien was forced to retreat step by step. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks. Because she stopped in a hurry, the snow around her feet was kicked up. She looked back and saw that behind her was an abyss. "You've been discovered." That person laughed. "Why didn't you fall for it?" "Because your technique is too lame," Hien said coldly. Then, she slammed the iron cudgel on the ground and jumped forward with the help of the cudgel, landing behind the masked person. Her hands did not stop moving, and she fiercely chopped down on the masked person's head. But the cudgel missed. The masked person dodged sideways, and the iron cudgel hit his shoulder. Even so, it was enough. Hien practiced stone weights every day, and her strength was no longer as weak as when she first entered the Liang province guards. Even a man with a physique like Huang Xiong's would suffer, let alone this person. Hien's attack made the masked person groan in pain. He almost lost his grip on the scimitar in his hand. Even so, his right hand lost its strength, and he could not wield the scimitar for the time being. "How is it?" Hien sneered. The masked person did not speak. He turned around and ran forward, intending to escape. Hien frowned and followed closely. Her endurance and physical strength were amazing, and she ran fast enough. For a moment, the masked person could not get rid of Hien. As long as he caught up with this person and took off his mask, he would be able to find out his identity. Both the witness and the material evidence were gathered. If it was really Hu Yuanzhong, Shan Han should be able to interrogate him and find out what they were planning to do in the middle of the night. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly saw the person in front of him stop. He shouted at Hien, "I have a gift for you." The scimitar was thrown at Hien's heart. Hien subconsciously caught it and held the hilt. Then, he saw another person roll out of the forest, under the night sky. The person who rolled out was actually wearing the red warrior robes of the Liang province guards. The mountain path was a long slope. The new recruit rolled all the way down, and if he went any further down, he would be in a bottomless abyss. Hien watched the masked person laugh mischievously and escape into the depths of the forest. He gritted his teeth and turned around to chase after the new recruit who was rolling down. The new recruit in the warrior robes rolled faster and faster. He didn't even make a sound. Hien's heart sank. He flew up and landed in the middle of the long slope. He caught the new recruit in his arms, and the two of them rolled to the side. After a while, they finally stopped in front of a tree. The body in his arms was still warm, but he didn't make a sound. Hien lowered her head to look. Under the starlight, a young face was revealed. She was stunned for a moment. There were tens of thousands of new recruits in the Liang province guards. She couldn't remember the names of every single one of them. At most, she could recall those who looked familiar. She remembered this person's face. It was the cowardly ghost king, Xiao Han, she met on the way down from the battle for the flag on Mount Baiwei. A few days ago, the young man who thanked her with a red face. Now, his face was completely pale. His eyes were wide open, as if he was filled with terror before he died. His clothes were red. Nothing could be seen, but they were wet and stuck to his body. Hien lowered her head to look at her hands. They were covered in blood. She unbuttoned the young man's clothes with trembling hands. There was a huge bloody hole in his chest. Some of his flesh had been hooked away, making it look hollow. He had died under a machete. No matter how many deaths she had seen, Hien couldn't remain calm every time she faced the death of someone close to her. She closed her eyes. A wave of anger rose in her heart. She muttered in a low voice, "Bastard." He was still so young. He hadn't even been on the battlefield, yet he had died in the desolate night of Mount Baiwe. If Ian hadn't followed the masked man up the mountain tonight, he would have died without a sound. The next day, his brothers in the guard station would have discovered that one of them was missing. Missing one of them? Why did they drag this young man up the mountain and kill him? Was he killed because he saw something, or was there another reason? No. Ian tightened her grip on the young man. She had fallen into a trap. Just as she thought of this, she heard rustling sounds in front of her. Someone was shouting, "Did you see anyone? Where is he?" Suddenly, the bushes in front of her were brushed aside. A recruit's face appeared. He was holding a torch in his hand. He happened to meet Hyeon's eyes. He didn't need to think to know how ferocious the scene was. She was holding a machete in her hand. The machete was still stained with blood. Her hands were also stained with blood. In her hands, a recruit from Liangzhou was lying on his back. He died with his eyes open. There was a bloody hole in his chest. It was a shocking sight. I found him," the recruit shouted in panic. He scrambled backward. "Murder! Hien killed someone." People quickly arrived. Hien raised her head and saw dozens of people, including Shan Han, Liang Ping, and the other instructors. They stared at Hien in surprise. Du Mao shouted, "Hien, you killed someone?" The weapon was in her hands, and the body was at her feet. She went up the mountain in the middle of the night and acted suspiciously. No matter how they looked at it, she looked like a spy with ulterior motives. This was the real gift from the masked man. Chapter 109. I didn't kill him. Hien stood up and faced them. The recruit who first discovered Hien pointed at him in fear and shouted, "If it wasn't you, then who was it?" At night, I went to the martial arts field to practice my crossbow. I accidentally saw someone riding a horse towards White Moon Mountain. The situation was critical, so I followed him. I fought with him for a while, but he ran away. Before he ran away, he threw this brother down. By the time I saved him, he was already dead. "Where did you get this scimitar?" Shinhan asked in a deep voice. "It belonged to him. He threw the scimitar over." "Is he crazy?" "He gave his weapon to someone else." "Can't you think before you lie?" Du Mao didn't believe him. "No, I think he's very smart," Hien said calmly. "Now, with this scimitar, I'm the suspect. If the weapon was stuffed into her hands, wouldn't it mean that she was the murderer who killed the recruit?" Shinhan stared at Hien. "When you went up the mountain, did you bring a weapon?" "I brought an iron head stick," Hien said. "When I rolled down the mountain with his dead brother, I lost it on the road. The chief instructor asked someone to look for it. Maybe they can find it." Shinhan ordered Liang Ping, "You take some people to look for it. Be careful, there's a signal." Liang Ping nodded and said yes. Hien felt a little tired and sat down on a shirt too. Her injury hadn't fully recovered. After today's torment, the old injury on her waist was aching. She really wanted to rest for a while. After a while, Liang Ping came back with a recruit. He said to Shan Han, "Chief instructor, we didn't find the iron head stick." "I think he's lying." Du Mao frowned. "He only brought this scimitar when he went up the mountain." Hien secretly sighed. Since the other party came for her, he naturally wouldn't leave any evidence behind. Presumably, when she went to save the recruit, she had already picked up the iron head stick. However, she still had a trick up her sleeve. "I suspect that this person is Hu Yuanzhong," Hien said. "When I fought with him, the iron head staff hit his right shoulder. As long as we return to the city guard station, we can check if he went out at night and see if there's a wound on his right shoulder." "Are you quibbling?" A recruit looked at her suspiciously. Hien shrugged. "Right now, I'm unarmed. There are so many of you. Are you afraid of me? It's a small matter to wrongly accuse me, but it's a big matter to lead a wolf into the house. If the true culprit is hidden among the Liang province guards, perhaps the next person to be assassinated will be you, brother." She spoke neither too fast nor too slow, but her tone was cold. The new recruit who spoke was frightened and didn't dare to continue speaking. Ma Damii looked at Shan Han and said, "Chief instructor, this..." To be honest, he quite liked Ian. It was rare for a young man of his age to be so outstanding in all aspects. Moreover, his personality was cheerful and easygoing, without the slightest bit of arrogance. He was very likable. However, this was a matter of life and death, so he couldn't be careless. Bring him back first and see if what he said is true. Shenhan turned around and said, "Listen to my orders and go down the mountain immediately." Ian secretly sighed in relief. Fortunately, Shenhan was reasonable and didn't kill him with one blow. When they went down the mountain, the atmosphere was a bit gloomy, perhaps because of the death of one of their companions. Ian asked Ma Damei, "Instructor Ma, why are you going up the mountain?" Ma Damei had a kind smile on her face and always treated Hien kindly. Even at this time, she still patiently answered his question. A recruit woke up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet and saw someone riding a horse towards Mount Baiwe. He told the chief instructor, and the chief instructor told us to go up the mountain to investigate. Before we came, we didn't know it was you. Wasn't this the same process as when she chased after the masked man? Hien faintly felt that something was wrong, but he didn't say anything. Since you said you fought with the masked man, Ma Damei asked, how was his skill? Very good. If I wasn't injured, I could have caught him if I delayed a little longer. However, this person is cunning and cruel. He used the corpse of his comrades to lure me away and escape by himself. Hien became angry when he talked about this. Today's incident was all arranged by him. Ma Damei smiled and asked in an ambiguous tone, "Young man, although I have always admired you, I have to ask you one thing. What's so special about you that the masked man would go around in such a big circle to slander and scheme against you? What's so special about me?" Hien carefully thought about it. She was kind to people and had no conflicts with the recruits of the Liangzhou guards. It was just a few days ago when she quarreled with Hu Yuanzhong. Hu Yuanzhong should be the only person in the Liangzhou guards who was hostile to her. But what did she do? She never directly asked about Hu Yuanzhong's background. At most, she asked him a few questions in a roundabout way. Even if she suspected that he was a Chong person, she didn't reveal any of it. If this was a reason he schemed to frame Hien, wouldn't it be too obvious? Thinking about it, he finally went down the mountain and returned to the Liangzhou guards. In the middle of the night, the Liangzhou guards were bustling with activity. Hien had instructors all around him, so he went to Hu Yuanzhong's room first. Everyone in the room was sleeping. When the instructors told him to get up, he was a bit confused. Xiao Mai groggily called out, "Why are you up so early today? It's not even time yet." When she saw who it was, she was so shocked that she almost put on her shoes the wrong way. Hien didn't hesitate and looked towards the wall. With just one look, his heart sank. A person was curled up on the bed, sleeping soundly. After being woken up, he slowly sat up with sleepy eyes. It was Hu Yuanzhong. He was actually in the room. Shenhan asked the people in the room, "Did any of you see Hu Yuanzhong go out tonight?" No. Brother Hu's leg is injured, so he sleeps earlier than us every day. I didn't see him go out." Hien looked towards Hongshan. Hongshan lightly shook his head at her. "He really didn't go out?" Shenhan stepped forward with an expressionless face. "Take off your clothes." Hu Yuanzhong was confused, but when Shenhan didn't say anything, he seemed a bit scary. He hesitantly took off his clothes. When he took off his outer garment to his arm, he saw that there was no problem with his right shoulder except for a few small cuts caused by the shrubs. If that iron rod hit him, there would at least be a large bruise. But there was nothing on his right shoulder. It wasn't him. He widened his eyes. Not only did he not relax, but his face became even uglier. This was an elimination. It was unknown what role Hu Yuanzhong played in this, but since there was no problem with him, it could only mean one thing. He wasn't just one person. There was a traitor in the Liangzhou guards. That was why this show was so perfect. "Shen Jiaodou," she said coldly. "That person is probably in the Liangzhou guards right now. Hurry up and take people to investigate. I think the most suspicious person is you." A head instructor stared at her and said, "Earlier, you said that Hu Yuanzhong killed him and called us back to check on his injuries. Now that Hu Yuanzhong has been cleared of suspicion, you want to change to another person. What is your purpose in stalling for time like this?" "I'm not lying." Hien frowned. As long as you investigate the entire Liangzhou guards, you will know that I'm not lying. Shut up, Shenhan shouted. The arguing stopped. Ian looked towards Shenhan. Shenjiao, you don't believe what I said? I only believe my own eyes. Shenhan said, come, take her to the dungeon. Ian, you can lock me up, but you have to investigate the truth. Otherwise, the Liangzhou guards will be in big trouble. You're already like this, and you're still cursing people. The head instructor said angrily, you're too arrogant. Yin was taken away. The rest of the people in the room wanted to ask, but didn't dare to. Xiao Mai and the others had cold expressions. Hu Yuanzhong asked curiously, Shenjiao, what happened? Did someone die? Shenhan didn't say anything. He turned around and walked out of the room. The head instructors who followed him out had serious expressions. Liang Ping hesitated for a moment and asked Shenhan, head instructor, how do you plan to deal with Yin? After all, he was a soldier under his command. Liang Ping didn't want to believe that Yin had ulterior motives. However, there were witnesses and evidence. Even if he wanted to exonerate him, he couldn't find a reason. This is a serious matter. Yin's identity is also not ordinary. Shenhan said in a low voice, lock him up first. We'll talk about it when the commander-in-chief comes back. Yes, the dungeon of the Liang province guards wasn't big, but it was dark and damp. Because it was winter, people would feel bone-chilling cold when they entered. There was no bed, so they could only sleep on the floor covered with straw. The quilt was also a thin layer of cloth. There were a few holes in it. It was unknown whether they were bitten by rats or something else. Ian sat on the floor and looked around. There was no one else in this dungeon other than her. The lock of the dungeon was specially made. It wasn't as simple as the one in her and Xiao Ju's room. With one look, Yin knew that she couldn't open it. After being reborn, she didn't even have the chance to show off her skills before she was sent to prison. She should have sighed and lamented, but at this moment, Yin wasn't in the mood. She was now certain that there was a traitor in the Liang province guards. That traitor probably had his eyes on her for a long time. That was why he knew that she went to the martial arts training field every 3 nights. Because of this, it was easy to arrange for people to wait on the horse path and lead her up Mount Baiwei. Whether it was going up the mountain at night or killing the new soldiers, it was all to accuse her of conspiring against the law. As for why Ma Damei had said that they would go to such lengths to slander her, it was because Yin had discovered the other party's identity as a member of the Chang tribe. She had originally suspected that the rash on Hu Yuanzhong's hand was related to his actions before and after. Later, when she met the masked man on Mount Baiwei, he held a scimitar. It was also a blade technique that the Chang soldiers used. She was 80% certain. Now that Yin was in prison, there were still Chang people in the Liang province guards. This made her hair stand on end. Xiao Ju wasn't in the Liang province guards. The tens of thousands of new soldiers had never truly been on the battlefield. If they encountered the Chang people now, it would be like what she had encountered in Mo County. They would probably be completely wiped out. Since the other party had schemed so meticulously, they must be planning something big. If the news of the Yudo harassing the people in Zhangtai was false, and they were trying to lure Xiao Ju away, then the Liang province guard were like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Xiao Ju had already been gone for 20 days. Based on the fact that he had discovered that the information was false when he arrived in Zhangtai and rushed back overnight, it would take him another 10 days to reach the Liang province guards. Then the other party must have chosen to make a move within 10 days. They didn't have much time left. Yin was still locked up in the dungeon, and no one believed her words. When Shenhan ordered people to take her to the dungeon, Yin had thought of directly fighting them and breaking free of their control. However, if she did that, she wouldn't be the one to kill them. She would really be the one to kill them. She really didn't want to live with the crime of murder on her shoulders. Moreover, the new soldiers of the Liang province guards were all her companions. They stayed together every day. She didn't want to live alone and watch them die for nothing. She didn't know when this chess game had become a dead end. However, she had already quelled the chaos in Western Chang. The Chang soldiers had also suffered great losses in that battle. They wouldn't be able to make a comeback for at least 10 years. Why would they dare to take such a dangerous step? Yin couldn't understand it either. At this moment, he suddenly heard a noisy voice from outside. "Let me in. I just want to say a few words. My father is the Vice Minister of Internal Servants, official song. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility." It was Song Taotao's voice. Yen was startled. Song Taotao usually came to give her pastries and candies every few days. He didn't expect her to know about what happened today. The guard outside said something again, and Yen heard Song Taotao say unreasonably, "You want to try and stop me again? If you stop me again, I'll tell second young master Xiao that you molested me when he comes back." Something fell to the ground with a clang. In the next moment, Yen saw a pink dress fly in. Song Taotao said, "Big brother he." "Miss Song." Yen smiled. Song Taotao threw herself in front of him and hurriedly stuffed 2 steamed buns into Yen's hands through the bars. "It's too late. I brought you some leftovers from Dr. Shun's dinner. I heard my father say that people in prison don't have food to eat every day. I'm afraid I can't come every day, so I brought 2 for you first. Eat sparingly." Everyone in the Liang province guards thought of her as a murderous demon, but this little girl wasn't afraid of her at all. She was even afraid that she would starve. Yan's heart was filled with gratitude. He said warmly, "Miss Song, you shouldn't have come." "Why shouldn't I come? I heard from them that you killed someone." "I didn't kill that person." Song Taotao nodded. "I guess so. You're so kind-hearted. You're always willing to help when you see injustice. Why would you kill someone? You must have been plotted against. Don't worry, I'll definitely get you out." Yen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Miss Song, it's best if you don't get involved in this matter." However, this girl was very stubborn. "You're my savior. My father said that a drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. Right now, the Liang province guard instructors are old-fashioned and stubborn. They won't listen to me. When second young master Xiao comes back, I'll talk to him and see if he can help." Yen thought it'll probably be too late by the time Xiao Ju comes back. He looked up at Song Taotao. The little girl's expression was very serious. Yen wanted to laugh, but when he thought of the current situation, he couldn't. If the Chan tribe really came and Song Taotao fell into their hands, what would happen? Yen shuddered. "Miss Song," after a while, she said, "since you want to help me, I have a favor to ask of you." "What is it?" Song Taotao looked at her. Yen sighed softly. "We can only treat a dead horse as a living one." In Shun Han's room, Chung Lisu and Shun Han were confronting each other. "Young Master Chung, please go back. Without the Commander-in-Chief's orders, this one doesn't dare to let Yen out," Shun Han said helplessly. Chung Lisu sat in front of his door, blocking the door to prevent him from leaving. He only said, "Shun Jiaodo, you have to believe me. Brother, he really can't be the murderer." Du Mao stood to the side and couldn't help but say, "Young master, everyone knows that you and Yen are close friends. However, when we went up the mountain, there were witnesses and evidence. How can you deny it? Even if the Commander-in-Chief is here, he has to follow the rules. Besides, we haven't said that we'll immediately convict Yen. Everything will have to wait for the Commander-in-Chief to come back and make a decision. But right now, Uncle isn't even in the Liang province guards." Chung Lisu shouted. "It's easy for you to say. Do you know how cold and dark that dungeon was? Brother, he was all alone in there. Do you know how scared he was?" Du Mao. Chung Lisu's words made it sound as if he had been in the dungeon himself and could empathize with him. Besides, it wasn't as if Yen was all alone in there. With Yen's temperament, he probably didn't take this matter to heart at all. Chung Lisu really didn't need to worry about him. Seeing Shun Han's firm attitude, Chung Lisu had no choice but to take a step back. He said, "It's fine if you don't want to let him out, but I have a condition." Shun Han asked, "Young master, what are your orders?" "The food in the dungeon is too shabby. My brother can't stand such hardships. I won't go overboard. Whatever my brother eats in the dungeon must be provided as usual. There's still 2 more weeks of winter. It's too cold. Give him 2 more blankets and hot water every day." "Young Master Chung," Shun Han interrupted him. "This is against the rules. I can't do this and I can't do that. What exactly do you want?" At this point, Chung Lisu also became angry. He stood up and said loudly, "If you can't do it, then I'll go myself. I'm telling you, you'll regret treating my brother like this." After he finished speaking, he turned and ran away. The door was slammed shut with a bang. Shenhan couldn't help but feel a headache. A child of this age, especially a young master who was spoiled by his family, was really unbearable. Xiao Ju usually looked cold and harsh, but to be able to spend so much time with Cheng Lisu every day, he could be considered very patient. The remaining instructors in the room all looked at Shenhan. Liang Ping asked, "Head instructor, what should we do now?" One person had died in the military camp. Although Hien was now locked up, Hien's words still caused waves in everyone's hearts. If there really was a spy in the Liangzhou guards, that person was still hiding among the new recruits and had killed one of their comrades without anyone noticing. It definitely wasn't for fun. Who was this person? Who was the master behind him? What was his purpose? When would he reveal himself? None of this was known. This person could be Hien, or it could be someone else. If it was Hien, then it would be easy to handle. If it was someone else, then it would be very bad. "Find someone to keep an eye on that Hu Yuanzhong," Shenhan muttered. "If Hien's words are true, then this person will definitely make a move." Ma Damei asked, "Has there been any letter from the commander-in-chief in the past few days?" Shenhan shook his head. His gaze was also covered in a layer of worry. There had been no news from Zhangtai until now. In the past, this was very rare. Hopefully, nothing bad had happened. Cheng Lisu ran out and bumped into someone. That person covered his forehead and said, "Ayo." He scolded, "Don't you look where you're going?" Cheng Lisu took a closer look. It was Song Taotao. He had a stomach full of anger when he was with Shenhan. Now that he saw Song Taotao, he couldn't help but get angry. "Who told you to bump into me?" Song Taotao rolled her eyes at him. "I can't be bothered with you." She walked straight ahead. "Stop." Song Taotao turned her head and asked, "What are you doing? Are you going to find old Shen?" Cheng Lisu pointed in the direction of Shenhan's house. Song Taotao turned around and said angrily, "Why? Can't I?" This time, Cheng Lisu was excited. He took a few steps forward and said, "Are you pleading for my big brother?" Song Taotao glanced at him. Although she didn't like Cheng Lisu's good-for-nothing attitude, she couldn't help but admit that this guy cared about Hien quite a lot. Every few days, he would send food to Hien. Hien had a good relationship with him. She said, "So what if I am?" "Don't mention it." Cheng Lisu waved his hand and looked depressed. "I just came out of old Shen's house. This person is very stubborn. I tried to persuade them, but they didn't believe that my big brother he didn't kill anyone. They also refused to send food and blankets to Big Brother He. Are you stupid?" Song Taotao expected better from him. "If they don't agree, can't you go yourself?" She glanced at Cheng Lisu's dejected expression and said angrily, "I already went there and sent steamed buns to Big Brother He. You don't have to worry." "Really?" Cheng Lisu's eyes lit up. He looked at Song Taotao. "I didn't expect you to be so loyal." Song Taotao sneered. "Thank you for thinking so highly of me, young Master Cheng." After she finished speaking, she continued to walk forward. Hey. Cheng Lisu stopped her. "Why are you still going to find old Shen? I already said that this person is unreliable. It's better to rely on the two of us. Because of Hien, these two people could now be called the two of us. If Hien was here, he wouldn't dare to believe his ears." "I think so too. It's Big Brother He's fault for trusting him." Song Taotao said helplessly, "I was asked to do this by someone. It was Big Brother He who asked me to find Xinjiao." "Big Brother asked you to go?" Cheng Lisu was stunned. "Yes." Song Taotao walked around him. "So don't disturb me. I'm going to find someone first." After she finished speaking, she ignored Cheng Lisu and walked forward. After taking 2 steps, she turned around and walked back to Cheng Lisu's side. Song Taotao lowered her voice and whispered in his ear, "Big Brother, he also said that you must not walk around in the Liang Province Guard for the next few days. If a new soldier comes looking for you, don't go. It's best if you stay by Shan Jiaodo's side at all times." "Old Shun?" Cheng Lisu frowned. "Why do I have to follow him? I don't even have enough time to annoy him. This is Big Brother He's instructions." Song Taotao's expression darkened. "You better listen to him." She thought of that youth standing in the dark dungeon and shoving something into her hands. He said worriedly, "I'm afraid there are traitors among the Liang province guard. While I'm not here, follow Shun Han and have him protect you. You must be careful." Chapter 110. Yin had been in the dungeon for 2 days. In these 2 days, other than Shin Han, who came once, no one else came. Even if Shan Han came, he didn't mention anything about the situation outside. She assumed that nothing had happened for the time being. The more this was the case, the more Yin felt that something was wrong. Unfortunately, the dungeon of the Liang province guards was as solid as a rock. It was hard for her to think of a way to escape. Song Taodao and Chung Lisu were probably under surveillance. She hadn't seen them in these 2 days. To Yin, eating and sleeping coarsely wasn't unbearable. As time passed, the most frightening thing was that the unseen danger was gradually approaching. Unfortunately, no one had noticed it yet. It began to snow in the middle of the night. The snowflakes were as big as goose feathers. They danced in the air and landed on people's bodies. Even their cotton clothes couldn't withstand the bone-piercing cold. 2 sentries stood on the balcony. They couldn't help but rub their hands together and blow air into their palms. Suddenly, a white mist fell in front of them and quickly dissipated. The Liang province guard were in a state of silence. The guard station in winter wasn't as lively as it was in summer. There were no new recruits who went to a Lu River to take a shower at night. There were also no noisy cicadas. There was only the cold of the snow melting on the ground. "I'm going to the latrine." One of the sentries stomped his feet. "I can't hold it in anymore." His companion urged him, "Go quickly and come back quickly." The man put down the drumstick, picked up a knife, and turned to go to the latrine. The snow was heavy. In just a moment, a thick layer of snow had accumulated. When he stepped on it, his shoes were submerged. The cold air climbed from his feet to his head. The sentries shivered from the cold and hurriedly ran to the latrine at the back. There were torches outside the latrine. A few days ago, a new recruit had woken up in the middle of the night to relieve himself. He didn't see the road clearly and slipped on the icy ground, injuring his leg. After that, Shun Han had people set up a fire here to illuminate the road. When the sentries entered, there was another person inside. He glanced at the person under the dim light and smiled. "Oh, you're up too?" The other person smiled and replied, "I just got here. It's too cold. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't hold it in, I wouldn't have made this trip," the sentinel complained. After he was done, he pulled up his pants and was about to walk out. That person was also done and followed him out, one in front of the other. The torches at the door reflected a person's shadow in the snow, swaying back and forth. The sentry casually glanced and saw that the shadow behind him had unknowingly opened his arms. He was startled and was about to shout, with one hand covering his nose and mouth. The person behind him pulled out the knife at his waist and slashed it across the sentry's neck. Blood splattered all over the ground. The young man's body silently fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Without any hesitation, the black shadow bent down and dragged the sentry's corpse away. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. In just a moment, the bloodstains were covered. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the sentinel walked out again. He grabbed a handful of snow, wiped the blood off the knife, and put it back on his waist. He then tidied up the felt hat on his head and walked up the stairs. On the balcony, his companion was waiting impatiently when he suddenly heard movement. Seeing the sentry who had just gone to the toilet come back, he let out a sigh of relief and scolded. "Why were you gone for so long? Did you go to slack off?" The sentry shook his head, lowered his head, and breathed into his mouth, as if he was too cold to speak. Seeing this, his companion couldn't help but rub his hands. "Mother, this is too cold." The sentry pulled his felt hat down very low. Seeing this, his companion scolded. "Do you think you won't be cold if you pull your hat down? If you pull it up, you won't even be able to see. How are you going to keep watch like this?" He reached out his hand to lift the sentry's hat, but the moment he got close, he suddenly froze. The sentry's clothes were different from the pure red and black of the recruits. At the collar, there was a layer of white border. Now, at the white border of the other party's collar, there were 2 red dots. These were not old ink stains. The color was bright, and it was slowly becoming denser. A moment ago, when the other party went to the toilet, there wasn't any. His companion looked at the sentry who had not said a word since he came back. He was about to pull out his knife, but his movements were too slow. The other party actually had two knives. One knife, which belonged to the dead sentry, stabbed into his chest. The other knife, with a curved tip, slit open his throat. He couldn't yell out and staggered to the ground. The murderer had already turned and walked down the platform. The sentry crawled on the ground with difficulty, trying to pick up the drumstick that had fallen to the ground. As long as he could grab the drumstick and strike the whistle drum, all of the Lyon province guards would wake up. This was the last thing he could do. Blood trailed down his body, a ghastly sight. He used all of his strength to crawl to the drumstick. Holding the drumstick, he wanted to raise his body to strike the drum. He had only raised half his body when suddenly a wave of intense pain came. Blood splattered onto the drum, and the hand holding the drumstick also fell to the ground. His right hand had been chopped off. The murderer returned and stood in front of him, saying in a low voice, "I almost forgot." Not far away, the commotion here seemed to have startled the patrolling soldiers on the other side. Someone yelled, "Hello? Are you guys all right?" This person pressed down on his felt hat and waved his hand in the distance. "I'm fine. I just fell down." Blood was everywhere on the ground. The sentry who had been on the verge of death just now had his eyes wide open. He was completely dead. The night was like an abyss, closing in on all of the Lyon province guards. The next morning, at dawn, the new soldiers got up to eat and went for a morning run at the practice field. Hong Shan and Xiao Mai sat together to eat. Not long after, Wang Ba, Huang Xiong, and Zhang Jiao also arrived. Huang Xiong asked, "He hasn't been released yet?" Hong Shan shook his head. "This can't go on," Zhang Jiao said. "It's been unusually cold these days. I heard from young Master Cheng that there's nothing in the dungeon. Even if he doesn't freeze to death, he'll get sick." In the end, they were comrades who had fought for the flag together. Even though they had complained about Yin because of the green hat incident, when it really came to this point, they weren't completely without worry. "Do you guys think Yin will be released after the commander-in-chief returns?" Wang Ba asked. "It's hard to say," Shi Tu answered. "Why?" Wang Ba was curious. Right now, all of the Lyon province guards know that Yin killed people, but no one can find evidence that he didn't kill anyone. Hong Shan sighed. "What evidence does he need? He's not an idiot. He killed people, but didn't bury them. Why would he purposely leave the corpses for others to use? This is the evidence." Xiao Mai whispered, "This is too far-fetched." Wang Ba glared. "How is it far-fetched? Tell me, how is it far-fetched?" As they spoke, a commotion suddenly came from outside, mixed with someone's cry of alarm. "Someone died. Someone died. Quick, go find the instructor." What? Everyone went out to take a look. They saw a short, quick-witted recruit anxiously saying, "The practice field, the brothers on sentry duty at the practice field are all dead." They were all dead. Everyone's expression changed. They all got up and rushed to the practice field. Inside the practice field, blood flowed like a river. No one knew when the snow had stopped. Some of the blood was buried by the snow, while some had frozen and landed on the practice field. The brutal acts of last night could be vaguely seen. There were dozens of sentries on the platform and around the practice field. Not a single one was left alive. The corpses were placed in the center of the practice field. They were piled up haphazardly, as if they were piling up food for pigs and sheep. The dead soldiers were all killed with a single slash. Their throats were slit. It was extremely tragic. One of the soldiers piled at the top had his right arm cut off neatly at the elbow. This person was wearing a sentinel's uniform. His right arm had been cut off when he wanted to beat the drum. They were all companions who spent day and night with each other. Their lives were taken just a wall away. For a moment, the eyes of everyone in the practice field turned red. Someone said hatefully, "Who did it? If I find out, I'll—" Someone's voice sounded. It had a hint of oppressive arrogance. "What will you do?" No one knew when, but from behind the practice field, from the horse path connected to White Moon Mountain, a group of cavalry had arrived. There were about a few hundred people, and at most 1,000 people. The leader was a long-haired man. He was riding on a horse. He wore dark armor and held a scimitar that was half a person's height. His figure was extremely burly and muscular. His shoulders and back were very wide. His nose was very high, and his eyes were a deep blue like lake water. His appearance was different from the people of the Central Plains. When he smiled, he was like a vulture grinding its teeth. It had a sinister, bloody aura that made people's hearts palpitate. "Who are you?" the recruits asked. The long-haired man ignored them. He only approached the recruit who had just spoken. "If you find out, what will you do?" His smile had a hint of cruelty and tyranny. The recruit could not help but tremble when he faced this person. He gathered his courage and said, I will definitely seek justice for my dead comrades." "Is that so?" The long-haired man laughed. "How will you seek justice?" Without waiting for the recruit to answer, he raised the scimitar in his hand and chopped down. Dong! A figure swept past and blocked his scimitar. However, the figure was knocked back a few steps by this attack. When he steadied himself, he looked at the long-haired man. "Your Excellency is very bold. You killed people in the Liangzhou Guard." It was Shun Han. "Shun Jiaodo, Chief Instructor Shun, is here." The recruits shouted excitedly. They suddenly had a backbone. "Chief Instructor?" The long-haired man looked at Shun Han. "You are the Chief Instructor of the Liangzhou Guard? Who are you?" Shun Han's face was as calm as water. "My name is Reborn. I heard that the general of the Dao Wei family of generals, General Feng Yun, Xiao Huaijin, fought peacefully and was undefeated in hundreds of battles. I especially came to ask for advice." "What's wrong? Xiao Huaijin doesn't dare to fight? What nonsense are you talking about?" A recruit couldn't help but retort. "You clearly know that the commander-in-chief isn't here. That's why you dare." "Shut up." Du Mao shouted to stop him, but it was too late. "Not here." Muzi's eyes narrowed. "That's really unfortunate." The instructors looked at each other. Their hearts gradually sank. The so-called asking for advice from Xiao Ju was nothing more than an excuse. This person probably already knew that Xiao Ju wasn't in the Liangzhou Guard, so he brought people here to provoke them. However, there were only 1,000 people at most, facing tens of thousands of Liangzhou soldiers, even if they were recruits who had never been on the battlefield. Wasn't this a bit too arrogant? Or was there another conspiracy? The sentries were all killed in one night. If it was an enemy, it was impossible for them to do this, unless there really was a traitor and they died at the hands of their own people. "Ma Damii said in a low voice, He Yin is telling the truth." He Yin was telling the truth. They had been watching Hu Yuanzhong these days, but Hu Yuanzhong had been well-behaved and hadn't made any strange movements. If he still had accomplices hiding among the recruits, everything made sense. "Get into formation," Shun Han ordered. The tens of thousands of elite soldiers behind him all drew their weapons. Since the other party had come with ill intentions, the men of Dao Wei had no reason to retreat. Muzi saw this and laughed loudly. He said, "Hey, head instructor, I didn't come here to fight with you. You seem to be from the Chang tribe." Shun Han sneered. "Many years ago, General Fei Hong and the Chang tribe fought. I thought that the Chang tribe no longer had any intentions of betrayal. Now that you've come to the Liangzhou Guard and killed dozens of my men, you can't be here to ask for peace, right?" At the mention of General Fei Hong, Muzi's expression changed slightly. After a while, he stared at Shun Han and said with a sinister smile, "Head instructor, don't slander me. I only wanted to learn from Xiao Huaijin, who knew that when I passed by this place last night, the sentries here were too unfriendly and got into an argument with my brothers. I had no choice but to kill them all." He said casually, "I thought that Xiao Huaijin's soldiers were more or less capable. I didn't expect them to be so weak. When they died, they didn't even make a sound." The recruits were filled with righteous indignation. "Head instructor, please don't be angry. I'm really only here to learn from each other." He looked at the recruits behind Shun Han with great interest. "If Xiao Huaijin doesn't want to fight, then let his soldiers fight. If that doesn't work, then you instructors are fine too." Liang Ping took a step forward. "You think too highly of yourself. Why are you so sure that we will fight? You don't want to?" Muzi clapped his hands calmly. A few people walked over from afar. One of them struggled and said, "Let me go." Shen Han's expression suddenly changed. A few foreign soldiers carried two people like chickens. One of them was Chung Li Su, and the other was Song Tao Tao. Both of their hands and feet were tied behind their backs. They were in a sorry state and were struggling endlessly. Shun Jiaodou. When Chung Li Su saw Shen Han, it was as if she saw her savior. She shouted, "Who are they? Why do they tie us up?" Who were they? Shen Han felt bitter. He had already sent many people to guard Chung Li Su and Song Tao Tao's door to protect them secretly. However, they were still captured. The other party's strength was not to be underestimated. They knew how to capture Chung Li Su and Song Tao Tao to restrict the Liang province guards. It was obvious that they were very familiar with the Liang province guards. Now, Rida Musi looked at Shen Han's expression with satisfaction. "Head instructor, are you still willing to learn from us?" Song Tao Tao shouted. "How can we learn from each other? Why would they be so kind? There must be a trap." Shen Han said, "Okay, straightforward." Rida Musi sat up straight. "The weather is too cold. I'm too lazy to fight too much. 3 matches. You can pick 3 people." He said to the people behind him, "Brothers, who is willing to go up? Go." Someone behind him said, "Commander, Wallah is willing to fight." This was a very well-built man. The Chang people had always been physically strong. When compared to the people of the Central Plains, they looked especially thin and weak. He was not old, only in his early 20s. However, he was 9 feet tall, like an ancient giant. He also had a ferocious look. His eyes were slightly protruding like a bull's. He held a curved sword in his hand. At first glance, it was obvious that he was not someone to be trifled with. "Good," Rida Musi shouted. "Wallah is so brave, as expected of the Chang people." He then looked at Shen Han. "What about you?" The tiles were so strange and huge that anyone who looked at them would want to retreat. Moreover, the corpses on the training ground clearly showed how cruel the Chang people were. For a moment, no one in the Liang province guard responded. "If no one is willing to fight, then your head instructor will do it." Rida Musi smiled. "This kind of battlefield is a good time to teach the recruits." On the side, Liang Ping gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to fight, a voice rang out. "Let me do it." This was a young recruit from the vanguard. His name was Wei Huan. Shen Han still remembered this person because his knife skills were outstanding. He was one of the best in the vanguard. However, his personality was very gentle and shy. He was not as outstanding as Lei Ho. Therefore, although he and Lei Ho were outstanding, they were far less eye-catching than Lei Ho. Right? Speaking of Lei Ho, Shen Han was startled. "Where was Lei Ho?" "You?" Rida Musi glanced at Wei Huan and said with a fake smile, "Your courage is commendable." Wei Huan slowly walked forward until he was in front of Wallah. "I am willing to spar with you." Wallah smiled. He looked around and saw the high platform of the training field. "Let's do it there. The height is good. If I chop off your neck, the people below will be able to see it clearly. Isn't that good?" Wei Huan's expression did not change. Wallah laughed loudly and leaped onto the high platform. "Let's fight." In the past few days, there had been countless people on the high platform of the training field. However, they were all recruits of the Liang province guards. They sparred with each other. The recruits below the platform were in a relaxed mood. As they watched, they gave pointers. They could see the flaws and the brilliance of each battle. Every battle had something to gain, because they also knew that there were many more such battles. None of them were as depressing as today. Rida Musi suddenly thought of something. She looked at Shen Han and said in a voice that everyone could hear, "Head instructor, I forgot to tell you. The rules of the Chang tribe are that on the life and death arena, life and death do not matter. Only when one side dies can victory be determined." "What?" Liang Ping said angrily. "Warriors must be prepared to die in battle at any time. This is the highest honor," Rida Musi said coldly. "There are no exceptions." On the platform, Wei Huan slowly unsheathed the knife at his waist and nodded at Wallah. The dungeon was as dark and damp as ever. The guards at the door had disappeared at some point. The dungeon was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The sound of human footsteps was especially ear-piercing. The black shadow walked down the stairs step by step. The shadow of the torch at the door swayed slightly. In the innermost cell, someone was curled up into a ball, sleeping against the wall. She seemed to have caught a cold and was shivering, her lips pale. The black shadow stopped in front of Ian's cell. There was an empty bowl on the ground. It was unclear whether it had been filled with water or rice. It had been licked clean, and the bowl was shining. The thin blanket was very short and could not even cover her entire body. She was curled up into a ball, and her feet were exposed. Her body was trembling slightly, and her face was abnormally pale. The black shadow looked at her for a moment, then reached out and inserted the key into the keyhole. With a click, the lock opened. The person in the cell was still unaware. He walked in. The young man's former high-spirited appearance was completely gone. This appearance was no different from any other prisoner. He seemed to be somewhat regretful, but also somewhat vigilant. He stood in place without moving, staring at the young man's face. The youth did not move. After a while, the black shadow slowly covered her. At this moment, the youth suddenly raised her head, revealing a pair of clear black and white eyes. There was not a hint of sleepiness, and she was very awake. "You." He only had time to say one word. Before the knife in his hand could fall, he felt a pain in his lower body. He had been kicked right in the heart. The pain caused him to kneel on the ground. The next moment, white silk was wrapped around his neck. Ian's voice came from behind him. "I've been waiting for you for a long time, Leho." Leho's eyes rolled back in his head, but Ian's strength was great. His legs were pressed down on Leho's legs, making him unable to move. Seeing that Leho was about to be strangled to death by Hien suddenly let go. Leho suddenly had space to breathe. He clutched his neck and gasped for air. He saw Hien walk in 2 or 3 steps in front of him. Like prying open a duck's mouth, Hien poured something in his mouth. Leho was panting with his mouth open. How could he defend himself against this? He immediately drank the thing without leaving a drop behind. He wanted to say something, but he could not muster the strength in his body. He only felt his whole body go numb. In just a moment, he fainted and did not move anymore. Hien kicked Leho's face twice. After confirming that this person did not move, he tore the white silk into 2 and tied up Leho's hands and feet. That day, she had asked Song Tao Dao if she had any weapons on her. But Song Tao Dao was a girl. How could she carry a knife or a sword with her? She searched her entire body and only had a bottle of knockout drug. She had stolen it from Shun Mushue's table. She thought that if she met a bad person, she could use it. Hien was desperate and took it. This was not enough. She also borrowed Song Tao Tao's belt. Song Tao Tao's belt was bought in Liangzhou by Qi Wu after she returned to the guard station. The material was special. It was extremely sturdy and durable. It was comparable to rope. When necessary, the belt could also strangle someone to death. Hien thought that since the other party deliberately framed her for murder and sent her to the Liangzhou guard's dungeon, it seemed that they were afraid of her. When she entered the dungeon, the other party would definitely not give up and would come to silence her. She had to carry a weapon on her at all times so that she could counterattack at any time. But all her weapons had been confiscated. She only had the bottle of knockout drug and Song Tao Tao's belt. This morning, no one came to deliver breakfast. This was very strange. Usually, breakfast would be delivered at this time. Because of Song Tao Dao and Chung Li Su's pleas, although Shan Han did not allow Song Tao Dao and the others to visit her, he did not treat Hien harshly. The guard station was usually very punctual. If no one came at this time, something must have happened. Hien's heart was itching, but he could not go out. He did not know what was happening outside. Later, he gradually calmed down. Since something had happened, the other party might take advantage of the chaos to come here and kill him. Before Song Tao Tao left, she did not know what she could do to help, so she gave Hien everything she had, including a box of cosmetic powder. Hien smeared some on his face, then smeared some on his lips. He curled up into a ball, like a seriously ill prisoner who couldn't get up. Just as she was guessing what had happened outside, she heard footsteps, which led to the scene in front of her. Hien dragged Leho to a corner, and lay down with his face facing the wall. The knockout drug would take effect for 16 hours. During this time, Leho would not wake up. She left the cell, turned around, and locked the door. Leho was now a prisoner. Chapter 111. On the martial arts stage, Wei Huan's water dragon saber and LA's stone axe were locked in a stalemate. One was a young recruit from the vanguard of the Central Plains, while the other was a brutal veteran of the Western Chang tribe. Even though Wei Huan's saber skills were outstanding, he lacked actual combat experience. Moreover, his opponent was a strong man who could lift 1,000 kilograms. Compared to Wei Huan's agility, LA's stone axe was huge and heavy. It seemed to be chopping without any pattern. The stone axe looked clumsy, but he was strong. When Wei Huan dodged, the stone axe smashed into the ground, leaving a crack in the shirt too. Wei Huan's physical strength gradually couldn't keep up. He was young and not as strong as Wala. He couldn't hold on for long with this kind of reckless chopping and smashing. Apart from leaving a scar on LA's face, he couldn't even get close to his opponent. After all, his opponent was wearing armor. This was an unfair battle to begin with. More and more wounds appeared on Wei Huan's body, but Tao didn't want to take his life. Every time he was about to hit Wei Huan, he would just miss by a few centimeters. Although he didn't hit any vital points, Wei Huan was still covered in wounds. It was like a cat catching a mouse. Once it caught it, it wasn't in a hurry to eat it. It had to play with the mouse until it was exhausted before it swallowed it. This was simply a one-sided slaughter. Below the stage, Shun Han saw the situation and clenched his fists until they cracked. He was about to step forward but was stopped by Raidam Yuzi. The vulture-like muscular man leaned on his horse with a bloodthirsty smile. "Instructor, you can't help." Shun Han pulled out his saber. "What? You want to fight with me too?" Raidam Yuzi laughed, his gaze sinister. "Of course I want to. I'll accompany you to the end." A group of Chang soldiers surrounded the martial arts stage. Once the Liangzhou Guard recruits wanted to help, these Chang soldiers would fight with them. Even if they could, it would be too late. On the stage, Wei Huan's vision was slowly blurring. He was getting slower and slower to dodge the attacks behind him. His strength was quickly draining. He couldn't dodge in time and was hit in the right leg by LA's axe. The pain pierced his heart, but he restrained himself and didn't make a sound. Wala walked in front of him. Wei Huan had no more strength to run. He saw Wala looking down at him like a butcher looking at a lamb on the chopping board. Wala said, "Tisk, it's over so quickly. How boring. The people of the Central Plains are so weak. They can't even compare to a finger of the Chang tribe." Wei Huan didn't speak. Large drops of sweat seeped out of his forehead, mixing with the blood on his face. He looked extremely miserable. "Don't worry, it won't hurt." Vala licked his lips and stared at him greedily. "When the stone hits you, your brain juice will fly out. It's beautiful. But you won't see it." After saying that, he waved his huge axe and went straight for Wei Huan's head. "Wei Huan!" Ma Damei shouted. Before Wei Huan entered the vanguard, he was the one who had led him. He wanted to save Wei Huan, but was stopped by a Xichang man. Wei Huan's life was in danger. At this moment, behind a martial arts practice stage, there was a leafy banyan tree. Even though it was winter, it didn't look yellow at all. Everyone was in front of the martial arts practice stage, so they didn't notice when someone was sitting in the banyan tree. By the time she saw it, that person was like a flash of lightning, swinging the towel tied to the tree like a swing. She let go of the towel in midair. Everything happened too quickly. She dashed to the front of the stage and kicked the axe that was aimed at Wei Huan's head. Relying on the inertia, even though Tao's body was strong, he was still knocked back by her sidekick. The axe was heavy and sharp, injuring himself as well. If it wasn't for his outstanding strength that allowed him to stand firm after taking 2 steps back, this stone axe might have cut deeper. "Hien," Wei Huan murmured. The Liang Province Guard recruits were also stunned. Hien was locked up in the Liang Province Guard's dungeon because of the White Moon Mountain incident. How did he suddenly appear here? Was he released? Wala looked at the person in front of him. The youth dressed in black had his hands on his hips. He tilted his head and smiled. "You are too fierce. If I hadn't acted just now, my brother's head would have been gone. The new recruits of the Liang Province Guard viewed them as a thorn in their side, and because they had wiped out all the sentries, there was a blood feud. When they saw them, the rims of their eyes turned red. The best was Wei Huan's expressionless face, but this youth was all smiles as if nothing had happened. A sliver of interest grew in Walla, as if he had found a new prey. "And who are you?" he asked. The black-clothed youth brushed his messy hair and smiled. "I am Yen. I was first in the Liang Province Guard's battle for the flag." She looked at Walla. "Perhaps you don't know what a battle for the flag is. It doesn't matter. You only need to remember that I am first in the Liang Province Guard." First? Below the stage, Rida Musi looked at her with narrowed eyes. "You?" In the end, Hien looked too short and skinny. If Walla and Wei Huan stood together like a strong tiger and a lamb, then Hien, who looked even weaker than Wei Huan, was like a chicken and an eagle when compared to Walla. "My apologies. I came a bit late. What are you all doing?" The youth smiled at Yin Yen. "If you were sparring, it would be a waste of resources to find someone else and not me." Walla laughed loudly. "You really boast shamelessly." "Hien," Shenhan called out to him. "Head instructor Shun." Hien looked at him. "I've been suppressing a bellyful of anger these past few days with nowhere to vent. It's good to have a fight to vent my anger. Instructor, please make an exception and stop blocking me." Shenhan had nothing to say. Rida Musi had come for the new recruits of the Liang State Guard. Since she wasn't willing to let the instructor go, she could only let the new recruits go. Among the new recruits, other than Hien, there weren't many who could fight her. Some had outstanding skills, but lacked actual combat experience. Those with actual combat experience were older, and their stamina was not as good as the younger ones. Hien's martial arts were peerless, and his mind was nimble. He already had a high chance of winning. It was good that he had attracted the attention of the Chang people on the stage. More importantly, Hien said, "May I ask if we are sparring now? If that's the case, how about I replace this brother of mine?" "You?" "That's right. I'm the first in the Liang Province Guard. Defeating me is better than defeating him." Hien glanced at Wei Huan on the ground. "Won't you feel more accomplished?" The Western Chang people below the stage laughed loudly. Rida Musi looked at him. "I really like this person's temperament. Let him go." Hien said, "Men, please carry this brother away." Wei Huan was carried away. As he was being carried away, he looked at Hien and said in a low voice, "You, be careful." Hien said, "Got it." On the high platform of the martial arts practice field, there were only 2 people left. As the recruits below the stage watched, they all broke out in cold sweat for Hien. In the past half a year, Hien had been in the limelight more than once or twice. Some people sincerely admired and worshipped her, while others were jealous of her. However, at this moment, the Liang Province Guard recruits were united against a common enemy. They only hoped that she could defeat them. Voila! Show those Chang people who are not to be trifled with. Let them know that the Liang Province Guard is not to be trifled with. The recruits below the stage were on tenterhooks, but Hien on the stage was still undecided. She smiled and said, "All right, I don't know what the stakes are for this competition. I'll say it first. How about this? If I lose, I'll be at your disposal. If you lose," she thought of the youth in her memory and laughed. She said casually, "You have to call me father." At this moment, the new recruits of the Liang Province Guard burst into laughter. Liang Ping was both worried and proud. "You're still joking at a time like this." However, no one on Rida Musi's side could laugh. Walla looked at Hien darkly. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "We don't need stakes. There will be 3 rounds. The loser will die, and the winner will live. This is the rule, regardless of life or death." Hien said, "Why are you scared?" "Not really." Hien said, "Instructor, throw me a steel whip. I want a long one." Shen Han grabbed the longest steel whip from the weapon rack and threw it over. Hien caught it and played with it in her hands. She looked at Walla. "Can I use a weapon?" "Yes." Walla sneered. "But are you sure you don't want to use a sword? A whip can't kill." The youth's lips curled. "It's enough to kill you." Before Walla could understand the meaning of her words, he saw the youth suddenly rush over with the whip. Walla was stunned, then laughed loudly. He raised his giant axe to meet the youth head-on. The youth rushed forward, but did not make a move. He only lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot to avoid the attack of the stone axe. He circled behind Walla and waited for Walla to turn around before swinging the axe and dodging to the side. She seemed to be taking the initiative, but she didn't attack. The whip coiled around her hand. She seemed to be circling Walla for some reason. In a flash, she turned and ran. Walla followed. As soon as he lifted his foot, he felt something wrapped around his foot. He lost his balance and fell to the side. But this big guy reacted quickly. When he realized that Yan's whip had coiled around his foot, he tried to steady himself. But Yan didn't give him the chance. She carried the whip behind her back and pulled it hard as if she was transporting goods. Walla couldn't support himself anymore. His body was huge and clumsy. Both his feet were steady. When one of his legs lost balance, the other leg couldn't be steady. In addition, Yan pulled from the other side. With a dong sound, he fell to the ground. The whip seemed to be as long as a person. Yan didn't know how to use it. She pulled the whip from under Walla's body, and it easily returned to her hand. She didn't stop walking. She rushed to Walla and reached out. She wrapped one hand around Walla's neck, and the whip coiled around his neck. Walla subconsciously pulled. Yan's hands tightened. The strength of his hands couldn't be underestimated after throwing rocks all day long. The strange strong man was wearing armor, but his neck wasn't covered. Ordinary flesh was also the weakest part. After all, he wasn't really made of steel. The people in the martial arts arena only heard a crack that made one's teeth ache. Walla's head drooped limply. "You're not human. You're an animal," Yan said in a low voice. "So, to kill you, a whip is enough." She raised her head again. Although she was smiling, her eyes were cold. She looked at the people below the arena and calmly said, "He's dead. I've won. Victory and defeat have been decided." Next, on the martial arts arena, the situation suddenly changed. Just now, Walla had tortured and killed Wei Huan like a cat playing with a mouse. He didn't deliver the final blow for a long time. He probably didn't expect that he would die at the hands of this seemingly weak youth in front of him. How long did it take to kill a person? A cup of tea, a stick of incense, or a quarter of an hour? It didn't take any of those. The recruits of the Liangzhou Guard knew that Yan was powerful. The scene of her sparring with Huang Xiong and Jiang Jiao was still vivid in their minds. However, the Yan in front of them seemed different from the Yan who had sparred on the martial arts arena. When this youth stopped joking, he was cold and chilling. His body carried a murderous aura that couldn't be looked at directly. She smiled and said, "There's no need for fancy performances on the battlefield. Think clearly about how to kill, then you can act." Her gaze fell on Rida Muzi. Rida Muzi returned her gaze. Slowly, the Liangzhou recruits below the arena came to their senses. One after another, they said excitedly, "Yan won. Yan killed Walla. He is amazing." Chung Lisu was caught, but she didn't forget to cheer for Yan. Beat them until their heads were swollen. Liang Ping and Ma Damei looked at each other. Yan's speed of killing was too fast, even for a genius. "You guys, that you stood on the high platform and smiled at the Xichang people. Could it be that you guys can't afford to lose? Who's next?" No one from the Xichang people spoke for the time being. She smiled again, this time with a hint of provocation. "I know that it's a bit scary to gamble with one's life. I didn't expect that the fearless warriors of Xichang would have a time when they don't dare to go on stage. But it doesn't matter. The people of the Dowei Central Plains have always been kind and benevolent. If you really don't want to admit defeat, just like what I said just now, call me father and this competition will end." "How about it? But who's going to call me father?" Yan stared at Rida Muzi. "You're their leader. Why don't you call me father?" "Bastard." A soldier behind Rida Muzi stepped forward and shouted angrily. Yan wasn't afraid at all. He said innocently, "Can't I do that?" Wang Ba said softly, "That's so satisfying." She's purposely angering her opponent. Huang Xiong said in a low voice, "But in this situation, it doesn't seem necessary." Yan's personality had always been arrogant and confident. In the past, people thought that he was just a teenager. In this situation, Angering Rida, Musi wasn't a good thing. I'll compete with you. A voice sounded from behind Rida Musi. Commander, Bajou is willing to fight. Rida Musi glanced at him. It was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. She only said, "Go." This man called Bajou went up to the high platform of the martial arts arena. He was different from Wala. Although Bajou was muscular, he wasn't as big as Wala. He was also older than Wala. He was about 30 years old. His whole body was covered in a black cloak. Even his head was hidden under a curtain hat. Half of his chin was exposed. His eyebrows and eyes weren't very clear. His whole person looked pale and strange, like a ghost. His voice was also hoarse, as if it had been burned by fire. It was as unpleasant as a crow's cry. Bajou walked to Wale's side. Although they were both partners, he didn't have any sympathy. He kicked Wale's corpse off the high platform of the martial arts arena and scolded, "You're a hindrance." Wale's corpse rolled down. He didn't even look at it. He only said to Hien, "You have old injuries." Hien's heart sank. This man called Bajou was more difficult to deal with than Wala was nothing more than a brute force warrior who didn't know how to adapt. To deal with this kind of person, as long as one grasped his weakness and attacked, the battle would quickly end. In every battle, the most frightening thing was to meet an enemy with brains like the one in front of him. He was able to discover his opponent's weakness. This way, he would be able to control his next move. He slowly raised the knife in his hand. Hien wrapped the iron whip around his hand and rushed towards his opponent. In the battle between Wei Huan and Wala, Hien was a spectator. He saw Wale's weakness and shortcomings in advance. Thus, when he fought with Wala, he was able to quickly, accurately, and ruthlessly finish off his opponent. In this match, Bajou was someone she had never seen before. However, this person had seen everything clearly when Bajou fought with her. In other words, Bajou understood Hien, but Hien knew nothing about Bajou. Hien seemed to be hiding many other things under his cloak. Hien was on guard. This person was also very cunning. He didn't directly clash with Hien. With Wale's example, he kept a distance from Hien. As long as the whip swung towards him, Bajou would quickly change direction. His body was much more agile than Wale's. For a moment, the iron whip couldn't get close. Hien's waist was already faintly hurting. Previously, when she was in Liangzhou City, she had been injured when she fought with Ding Yi. Later, she was tricked by a traitor to White Moon Mountain and fought with the person hiding in the dark. After several times, the wound that was originally about to heal had long since split open. That wasn't all. After that, she was thrown into the Liangzhou guard's dungeon. In the dungeon, there wouldn't be Shun Mushue delivering medicinal soup every day. It was cold and damp. Her wound had probably worsened. Just now, when she killed Wala, she used too much strength and pulled on her wound. It was fine for a short period of time, but after a long period of fighting with Bajou, she felt more and more pain that pierced her bones. Bajou smiled and said, "Why do you look so pale? Is it because the old injury on your waist is acting up?" Hien was startled. The curved blade in Bajou's hand had already wrapped around her iron whip, pulling Hien forward. The audience below the stage cried out in alarm. With the blade in one hand, Bajou's other hand unhesitatingly struck at the old injury on Hien's waist. Hien received a solid slap, but his movements didn't stop. The whip in his hand loosened, curling towards his face. It was evaded by Bajou, but it rolled off his veiled hat, revealing this person's face. The two of them simultaneously retreated and stood still. That palm was firmly pressed against her old injury. Hien forced herself to swallow the blood in her throat. A slight smile still hung on her face. Looking at the person in front of her, she mocked, "Tisk, so ugly." Without the veiled hat, Bajou's true face was revealed. Half of this person's face was fine and could be considered handsome. However, the other half of his face had been burned by fire and was full of potholes. There were dark red scars that looked like centipedes growing on his face and squeezing his facial features out of place. Below the stage, someone cried out in alarm. Hien had knocked off her veiled hat and exposed her true face. Bajou's expression was extremely ugly. Staring at Hien, He wanted nothing more than to eat He Yan's flesh and drink her blood. He Yan smiled and crooked her finger at him. Again, Ba Zhou sneered and rushed over. The moment He Yan moved, she knew it was not good. Ba Zhou did not show any mercy when he hit her just now. Now blood was seeping out. Fortunately, she had changed into Lei Ho's black clothes to keep herself warm. Even if she was bleeding, it would not be obvious. But if this continued, she didn't know how long she could last. In fact, the sparring on the stage was never the main point. The main point was to use these 3 sparring to buy more time. If no one could withstand the scimitar of the Xichang people, it would become a one-sided massacre. Then, there would be no chance for the rest of the matches. She must kill Ba Zhou in order to have the 3rd match. The Xichang people were good at using scimitars. Everyone's scimitar would be adjusted according to their body size and strength. Ba Zhou's scimitar tended to be more flexible. It would be difficult for He Yan's iron whip to wrap around his scimitar. He Yan's whip wrapped around Ba Zhou's leg. Ba Zhou scornfully said, "You are too naive if you think you can use the same move on 2 people." After saying that, he went around He Yan and slashed his scimitar towards He Yan's neck. Different from Walla, Ba Zhou was aiming for He Yan's life from the beginning. There was no false move at all. He Yan pulled the whip with both hands and held Ba Zhou's scimitar in front of his eyes. Ba Zhou laughed sinisterly and fell back. He Yan could not dodge in time. He saw Ba Zhou's right hand pull out a dagger from his cloak. This dagger was only as long as a person's thumb. It was as thin as paper. Rather than a dagger, it was more like a blade. If one was not close enough, it would be hard to see it clearly. Ba Zhou loosened his palm. In the eyes of others, he only slapped He Yan's waist. But other than He Yan, no one knew that the sharp weapon in his palm had pierced into his flesh. He Yan only felt a piercing pain in his waist. He clenched his fist and punched. Ba Zhou's face was right in front of him. He laughed sinisterly and said, "Does it hurt? If it hurts, then you—" His words stopped abruptly. He Yan clenched his fist and pressed it against Ba Zhou's throat, refusing to let go. Ba Zhou struggled frantically, but unknowingly, the iron whip had tied He Yan's leg to his. He had no way to escape. He struggled fiercely, but the more he struggled, the more his eyes rolled back. In the end, he vomited blood and gradually stopped moving. He Yan's face was expressionless. He pressed his fist against Ba Zhou's throat again. After confirming that the person under him was no longer breathing, he released his hand. There was a little iron-like thing on Ba Zhou's neck. It was just a little bit. The rest could not be seen. It must have been inserted deep into his throat. It was an iron caltrip. He Yan picked it up on the ground when he came here. There were only advantages and no disadvantages to placing some hidden weapons on one's body at any time. No one knew what kind of enemy they would encounter. They also did not know what kind of things they would encounter next and when they would encounter them. The only thing they could do was to increase their chances of survival. She couldn't get close to Ba Zhou because Ba Zhou was already on guard against her. Her final strike will be nothing more than a lose-lose strategy that would injure both sides. But she was still better than Ba Zhou. She was only injured by the old dagger wound on her waist. But Ba Zhou was already dead. "You have a trump card. How do you know that I don't?" she muttered. After a while, He Yan pulled the iron whip out from Ba Zhou's body with difficulty. She wrapped it around her wrist again. She stood up. She was wearing a black outfit. It was not as lively as when she was wearing the red outfit. She looked more stern. She also stood up straight. She did not look tired at all. She played with the iron whip on her wrist. She smiled faintly and said the same words as before. "He is dead. I have won. The winner has been decided. Next." Chapter 112. The people below didn't see clearly how He Yan and Ba Zhou were able to determine victory and defeat. They only saw the 2 of them wrestling. Ba Zhou hit He Yan, and He Yan used some kind of hidden weapon to stab Ba Zhou's neck. Although his method was not honorable, he won in the end. "Big brother, he is so powerful." Chung Lisu was the first to shout. "Good fight! Good fight!" "Shut up!" Song Tao Tao scolded him from the side. Chung Lisu was dissatisfied. "What's wrong with me cheering for my big brother? Now is not the time to relax." Song Tao Tao shook her head. Girls were more observant than boys. She felt that Yan's face was paler than before. Her heart skipped a beat, thinking that Yan might be injured. However, Yan was wearing black, so she could not see where he was injured. On the stage, the young man in black raised his chin slightly and asked with a smile, "No one dares to come up?" At this moment, Rida Musi suddenly laughed out loud. He clapped his hands as he laughed. Interesting, interesting. I didn't expect there to be such an interesting person in the Liang Province Guards. Before he finished speaking, he rode his horse towards the martial arts stage. His movements were swift, and the people around him were caught off guard. A few Yang Province recruits were almost trampled by his horse, but fortunately, they were pulled back by the people beside them. Rida Musi suddenly stopped his horse when he was one step away from the martial arts stage and flew onto the stage. He landed in front of Yan. "Commander, don't tell me you want to fight personally?" The young man was surprised. "I'm just a recruit. How can I do that? You killed 2 of my brave warriors. You don't look like an ordinary recruit." Rida Musi laughed. He was not at all displeased by the loss of his beloved generals. "I was just lucky. No need to be humble. I saw you fight with the 2 of them just now. You deserve to be number 1 in the Liang Province Guards." As Rida Musi spoke, he looked at the people below the martial arts stage and laughed disdainfully. "I think you're the only one here who deserves to be brave and resourceful." However, he changed the topic. "I wonder how long the wound on your waist can last." Ian said nothing. Rida Musi looked at her with great interest. "Ba Zhou is my most capable subordinate. He attacked your waist twice in a row just now. It seems that he has an old injury. The last time, when you stabbed the hidden weapon into his throat, he walked to Ba Zhao's side and used his foot to poke at Ba Zhao's corpse. Ba Zhao turned over. His hand loosened. Something stabbed into your waist. Was it a knife?" Rida Muko asked her with concern. "Ouch, it must be very painful." "Actually, it's not that bad." Ian smiled. "Not as painful as him." Rida Muko stared at her for a while and smiled. "Very good. I like tough bones like you the most. It'll be especially sweet when you're broken." Just like what Basho had done to Walla, he kicked Basho's corpse off the stage and chuckled, "Useless trash." Then Ba Zhao slowly pulled out the scimitar at his waist. Seeing this, Shen Han's gaze hardened. He said angrily, "Rida Musi, as a commander, how can you fight with a recruit of the Liang State Guard? If you want to spar, I'll accompany you." "You?" Rida Musi slowly shook her head. "Not as good as him. I want him. This is he." "Hien, head instructor Shun, let me do it," Hien said. Actually, it didn't matter what she said to Shen Han. Rida Musi had already set her eyes on Hien. That was the worst thing, but at the same time, it was fortunate enough that they would have more time. "Don't you want to change your weapon?" Rida Musi smiled. "My scimitar will break your whip." "Maybe my whip will break your scimitar," Hien said with a smile. She held the whip in front of her eyes with both hands. The Chang soldiers used scimitars. Everyone's scimitars were different. Rida Musi's scimitar was extremely long. It was half a person's height. It had been drenched in the blood of countless people. It had a dark red color. As soon as the scimitar was unsheathed, the sunlight fell on it. It smelled of blood. Hien could only choose the whip. In the years she had fought against the Chang people, she had always used a sword. Anyone here who had seen General Fei Hong would be able to recognize that her swordsmanship was exactly the same as General Fei Hong. As for using a scimitar, the Chang people were the best at using scimitars. Using a scimitar in front of them was no different from using one's weakness to attack their strength. It was just asking for trouble. After thinking about it, the iron whip was the most convenient choice. Rida Musi rushed over with his scimitar. His steps were fast. What didn't match his muscular body was that his movements were very nimble. It was also very clever. The distance was just right where Hien's whip couldn't touch him. Hien's whip wanted to wrap around his scimitar. Rida Musi dodged it and slashed at the iron whip with his scimitar. Bang! Although the iron whip did not break, it was unavoidably frightening. If this continued, no one knew how long this whip could last. The weapons on the weapons rack were for the soldiers to practice martial arts. It was good as long as they were sturdy and durable. However, Raidamuzi's scimitar was obviously a treasured scimitar. It couldn't be compared. He laughed and slashed with his scimitar. Tian's whip wrapped around the scimitar but didn't drag it. Raidamuzi was too strong. He said, naive. He pulled the scimitar towards himself. Tian's body couldn't help but fly towards him. He could be careful. Xiaomai couldn't help but blurt out. Tian flew towards Raidamuzi. Seeing that he was about to collide with Raidamuzi's scimitar, the youth suddenly smiled. He twirled his whip and slipped under the scimitar. He slapped Raidamuzi's face. She borrowed the force of flying over and swept past Raidamuzi's head. She rolled on the ground before stopping. The hearts of the people below the stage finally returned to their stomachs. Raidamuzi slowly turned his head. He was born fierce and ruthless. At this moment, Hien's scimitar on his face made him bleed. Blood flowed down his cheeks. Raidamuzi didn't seem to care. He wiped his face carelessly and licked the blood stains on the side of his lips. He stared at Hien and said, "You are really powerful." His voice was very soft. However, when it fell into the ears of the people, it made their hair stand on end. Hien said, "Same to you." The wound on her waist was very painful. When she rolled just now, the scimitar that pierced in her body was even deeper. However, she couldn't pull out the scimitar now. Firstly, there was no time for her to pull out the scimitar. Secondly, if she pulled it out, the blood wouldn't stop and she would lose her strength soon. But now, Hien wasn't as relaxed as he appeared to be. The scimitar that Bajou had stabbed into her body wasn't long. It was short and delicate, about the width of an index finger. Moreover, it was inserted horizontally. Although it didn't hit a vital point, it just happened to cover the old wound. The original wound split open. When she fought with someone on the martial arts field, it affected her skin and flesh. The scimitar pierced deeper. It was no different from feeling her flesh being cut open while she was awake. She lowered her head and quickly bit her lips. The color of blood appeared on her lips again. It looked like she was that high-spirited youth again. "How much longer can you hold on?" Raidamuzi wasn't worried. He smiled and said, "Your sweat is about to dry. Is that so?" Hien touched it. "Maybe the weather is too hot." Raidamuzi slowly raised his scimitar and pounced over with a hideous smile. "Your blood will also be completely drained." Hien rushed up. The Liang province guard recruits below were all on tenterhooks. When Hien faced Raidamuzi, he wasn't as skillful as when he faced the previous two. On the other hand, Raidamuzi was cunning and cruel. No matter how powerful Hien was normally, in the end, he was only a 16-year-old half-grown child. Jiang Jiao muttered, "He can't hold on anymore. He might be injured." Huang Xiong frowned. If there's really no other way, he touched the golden scimitar on his back. "We'll rush up together. We can't just watch him die in vain." Wang Ba scolded, "F***CK. Why didn't these instructors stop him? Why did they let young boy fight? Aren't they ashamed?" Shenhan stood in the crowd and stared at Hien's figure. The paper in his hand was about to be crushed. Liang Ping beside him was extremely anxious. He whispered, "Head instructor, we can't keep waiting like this. We can't let the Western Chang people take charge. Why don't act on your own?" Shenhan shouted, "Wait a little longer." Wait for what? On the stage, Hien and Raidamuzi exchanged more than 10 moves again. Her movements were not as fast as before. It was obvious that she was moving slowly. She grazed Raidamuzi's arm a few times with her scimitar. Every time, she narrowly avoided it, but in the end, she was injured. However, the smile on her face did not change from the beginning to the end. It was as if this was not a bloody battle of life and death. It was just a casual and happy spar with her companions after the day training. This made Raidamuzi puzzled. He said, "Are all Central Plainsmen as good at putting on an act as you?" "Not really." Hien's voice was a little unsteady from the pain. She smiled and said, "I'm especially good at putting on an act." Raidamuzi's smile was not as relaxed as before. Hien did not dare to let down her guard against him. When they fought against the Western Chang people in the past, the other party's commander, Raidamuzi, was brutal and cruel. He reaped countless souls with a scimitar. Wherever he went, bones were piled up. Raidamuji's favorite thing to do was to chop off the heads of captives with a scimitar and tie them to the tail of his mount. The bloody heads of the dead were enough to become the nightmares of many Central Plainsmen. The Fuyue army led by Hiyin and the Chong army led by Raidamuji fought many fierce battles. Every time they fought, Hiyin could sense how cunning and terrifying the other party was. In the final battle, Raidamuji died at the hands of Hiyin. When he was alive, he loved to chop off other people's heads. He probably did not expect that after his death, his head would be chopped off by others and placed in a box inlaid with pearls and jade. He would be brought to the imperial palace in the capital and sent to the emperor. He would become a general in exchange for a generous reward. After Raidamuji's death, the Western Chong had no leader. Soon, the rebellion was quelled, and the man in front of him, named Raidamuji, had the same face as Raidamuji. Hiyin had seen Raidamuji die with his own eyes. He would not come back from the dead. Moreover, Raidamuji's eyes were dark green, while Raidamuji's eyes were dark blue. Hiyin recalled that he had heard that Raidamuji had a twin brother who was born with brute strength and was vicious. However, he did not get along with Raidamuji's brother. He left a long time ago, and his whereabouts were unknown. Now, it seemed that this was Raidamuji's twin brother, Raidamuji. He probably knew about his brother's death. Perhaps he had obtained the remnants of the Chong army, which was why he brought his men to the Liangzhou Guard. He was also cunning. He found out from a spy that Xiao Ju was not in the Liangzhou Guard. The new soldiers here were young and inexperienced. That was why he dared to be so brazen. However, Raidamuji was not a fool. No matter how brave and arrogant his subordinates were, 1,000 of them could not win against the tens of thousands of elite soldiers of the Liangzhou Guard. Therefore, his men should be far more than this. This was a trap that had been set up long ago against the Liangzhou Guard. In front of the guard station was Mount Baiwei, and behind it was Wulu River. If they had an army, it would be impossible for them to cross from Mount Baiwei in such heavy snow. Therefore, it was most likely that they would take the closest water route at night and cross over. Hiyin had never seen Raidamuji before, but he had fought with Raidamuji many times and knew this person's background. This person loved to set up arenas and say that he wanted to spar with the other party. In reality, his methods were vicious. The martial artists of the Central Plains who walked the righteous path would most likely lose to him. In this way, they would lose their morale before the battle even started. Once they were afraid of the Chong people, they would most likely be defeated. Back then, many Dawei generals had fallen for Raidamuji's tricks. All was fair in war. Morale was the most important. Hiyin could see that although Raidamuji was not on good terms with his brothers, his methods were the same as before. The new soldiers of the Liangzhou Guard would not be able to avoid a fierce battle with Raidamuji's subordinates today. She had already done everything she could. The last thing was to gather enough morale for the men of Dawei on this training field. With morale, they will be able to display their true strength in their first battle. I hate pretentious people of the Central Plains the most. Raidamuji finally lost his patience. He looked into the distance as if he was waiting for some news. However, he did not receive anything. He turned his head and said, "Let's end this quickly." Hiyin smiled and said, "That's exactly what I was thinking." She reached out and tied the belt tighter. The belt covered the wound and prevented too much blood from flowing out. However, at the same time, it was more painful and uncomfortable. Raidamuji looked at her actions and suddenly said, "You remind me of someone." Hiyin asked, "Who?" Although I have never seen him, I heard from my unlucky brother that there was a general called Hirufei in the Central Plains. When he was shot on the battlefield, he could pull out the arrow shaft and continue to command the battle. In the end, he died at the hands of Hirufei. You are very similar to that person. Hiyin heard this and smiled. "Wrong. I am not Hirufei. I'm not like him." She glanced at the people of Liangzhou below the stage. "However, the men of Dawei are all like me. As long as they do not die, they will fight to the end. There will be thousands of General Fei Hong in the Central Plains. You're Western Chong." She looked up and said with a mocking tone, "How many can you produce?" After saying this, she waved her iron whip and charged straight at Raidamuji. Rida Amusi sneered and did not take it to heart. In his opinion, Hien was already injured. With old and new injuries, she was just an arrow at the end of its flight. Although her endurance was shocking, she could not hold on for much longer. The scimitar and the iron whip intertwined, producing the sound of metal colliding. Brother Xiaomai's heart tightened as she watched from below the stage. She did not dare to let go. Hien's movements became faster. She waved her whip faster and faster. She was faster than Rida Musi's scimitar. The scimitar was big and heavy. For an ordinary person, Rida Musi's movements were already very fast. However, it was not as fast as the iron whip. The whip took advantage of the gap between the scimitar and the scimitar. It came from everywhere and hit Rida Musi's face. It was only a bloody mark earlier. However, in just a moment, there were several more bloody marks on his face. Is this all you can do? Rida Musi was angered by the continuous whipping. Her expression became violent. The scimitar went straight for Hien's neck. However, Hien was petite and dodged it easily. You're just SOSO. The young man even had the time to turn his head and tease her. What was going on? Rida Musi was even more surprised. Why did it seem that as time passed, Hien's movements became faster and faster? Wasn't he injured? How could he still be so agile and not be affected at all? Could it be that he was pretending before? This kid did not have any old injuries at all. Hien dodged the tip of the scimitar. He tiptoed and circled behind Rida Musi. This person was wearing armor and was incomparably hard. It was not that her whip did not hit Rida Musi's body. It only landed on the armor and did not leave anything behind. Then from head to toe, it would be as if he had nothing left but a single weakness. She narrowed her eyes and attacked Rida Musi's back. Rida Musi turned around and used her scimitar to block Hien's iron whip, sending Hien flying. However, in the blink of an eye, she used the force to pounce on Rida Musi again. This was simply a suicidal fighting style. She only cared about attacking and did not care about defending. You can't be thinking of perishing together with her, right? Jiang Jiao muttered. In the eyes of outsiders, Hien, who seemed to be staking everything on a single throw, was actually not that bad. On the contrary, Rida Musi, who had the upper hand in the beginning, gradually fell into a disadvantage. This young man seemed to know the traces of his scimitar every time. Every time they exchanged blows, he dodged early. He also quickly captured the weakness of Rida Musi's scimitar skills and took advantage of the weakness to attack, making Rida Musi somewhat helpless. How old was he? He looked like he was 15 or 16 years old, but he could see her weakness in an instant. How terrifying was it to have an enemy? If this young man said that there were countless people like him in the Central Plains, what about Shi Chong? How many people did Shi Chong send out? There was no such genius, not a single one. In an instant, Rida Musi actually had the intention to retreat. His morale was low. However, he had wronged Hien on this point. No matter how powerful Hien was, he would not be able to quickly determine the trajectory of his opponent's skills after exchanging blows a few times, let alone someone like Rida Musi. It was perhaps because they were twins by blood, or perhaps because they learned from the same master. Rida Musi's scimitar skills and Rida Muji's scimitar skills were exactly the same. Hien had exchanged blows with Rida Muji countless times in his previous life. He knew himself and his enemy, and had long since memorized his moves. At this moment, it was convenient for him to deal with Rida Musi. And Rida Musi's fear, because of this, happened to fall into Hien's trap. He was just giving him a taste of his own medicine. They were used to attacking the morale of others, to boost their own morale. Now that they had finally experienced the feeling of being discouraged, this was a good opportunity. Hien's whip lashed out faster and faster, to the point that the surrounding people were a little dizzy. Rida Musi only felt that the iron whip seemed to have become a living snake, circling and dancing in front of him. Its shadow was everywhere. His scimitar swung over, but it hit nothing but air. Instead, he was hit on the forehead by the whip. The real whip was here. He furiously slashed at Hien, but the youth had already circled behind him. He had also done this when he was dealing with Walla previously. Rida Musi secretly cursed in his heart, but he saw that the iron whip was already flying in front of him, like a heavy shackle, and was about to wrap around his neck. Then, with another twist, his throat would be broken, and he would die like voila. In the nick of time, he shouted, "Kumuji!" This seemed to be the name of one of his subordinates. In the next moment, a woman's exclamation suddenly sounded in the martial arts arena. It was Song Tao Tao, who was grabbed by the Chong people and threw her onto the martial arts arena. The Chong people had strong bodies and great strength. Song Tao Tao was only a slender little girl, so she was thrown up like a commodity. If she fell, even if she did not die, she would be seriously injured. No one below the arena could make it in time. Hien's whip spun in front of Rida Musi's neck and flew towards Song Tao Tao. She also threw her body towards Song Tao Tao. The iron whip wrapped around Song Tao Tao's body. Hien flew over and caught Song Tao Tao in her arms. The two of them fell heavily to the ground together. Hien supported Song Tao Tao's body. With this fall, the wound on her waist deepened. She was caught off guard and let out a hiss sound. "Big brother, be careful." Suddenly, Chung Li Su's shout rang out. "Hien! Ahiga!" Anxious voices came from all directions. Liang Ping's voice was extremely shrill. Hien turned his head and saw a ray of light coming towards him. When she caught Song Tao Tao, her back was exposed. Rida Musi's scimitar fell fiercely and was about to cut her into two. Hien pushed Song Tao Tao away and closed his eyes because of the wind from the scimitar. She no longer had the strength to move. "Go to hell." Bang! There was no pain as expected, and there was no blood splattering. Something knocked the scimitar over, as if someone was blocking in front of her. Hien slowly opened his eyes. A familiar dark blue figure with a silver-scaled python embroidered with silver thread stood in front of her. A young man stood in front of her. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, and he was calm and reassuring. The long sword in his hand had not been unsheathed. It was crystal clear like snow and flowed with a bright light. It was this narrow and thin autumn drinking sword that brushed away the murderous scimitar. Commander-in-Chief. Commander-in-Chief. It's the Commander-in-Chief. The crowd below the arena was shocked for a moment, then suddenly became excited. The Commander-in-Chief is back. Uncle, Xiaoju is back. Hien looked over and felt that her vision was blurry. She could not see clearly. Xiaoju pulled her up from the ground. Hien had no strength and leaned on him softly. Xiaoju held her waist. He seemed to have noticed something and looked down. The young man in black seemed to be a little weak, but he didn't have any wounds. But at this moment, the hand that was holding Hien's waist felt a wet patch. His hand was stained with blood. He paused slightly and slowly looked at Rida Musi. However, his words were directed at Hien. His tone was as sarcastic as ever. "Why do you always get yourself into such a miserable state every time I meet you?" Hien smiled and said softly, "Maybe it's because I know that you will come to save me every time." Chapter 113. Xiao Huaijin. Rida Musi looked at the person in front of her. Her gaze was uncertain. Fei Nu. Fei Nu appeared behind him. Xiao Ju handed Hien to him. "Take them down." Fei Nu supported Hien. Song Tao Tao climbed up and followed behind. The two of them arrived at the arena. There were people all around them. Fei Nu asked Hien, "Can you still hold on?" Hien nodded. "Sit down first." Fei Nu helped her to sit under a tree. "The doctor will be here soon." "Doctor?" Hien was puzzled. The Liangzhou guards only had one female doctor, Shenmu Xue. At this moment, she was being stared at by the Chong soldiers. Beautiful women always attracted attention in the military camp. She looked up at the arena. "On the arena. Didn't you want to spar with me?" Xiao Ju casually drew his sword. His black eyes looked at the person in front of him. He smiled slightly and said, "Go ahead." Rida Musi asked, "Are you Xiao Huaijin?" Xiao Ju smiled. "It's the real deal." Everyone knew that De Wei had two famous generals, General Feng Yun, Xiao Huaijin, and General Fei Hong, Hiru Fei. However, just as Yin had never fought with the southern barbarians, Xiao Ju had never fought with the western Chong people. He had heard of his reputation, but it was his first time meeting him face to face. He had never seen Xiao Ju's real appearance. and the news he had received before was that Xiao Ju had gone to Zhangzhou. It was impossible for him to come back here in the time it took him to travel from Zhangzhou to Liangzhou. However, the sword in his hand did not look like an ordinary sword. Seeing that he did not move, Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows. "Are you afraid?" Rida Musi sneered. "You're just putting on an act." She raised her saber and charged forward. However, the young man did not move at all. The sword in his hand was so cold and sharp that it was unstoppable. His movement was like a falling flower sweeping across, breaking the curved blade. It was so fast and fierce that it dazzled everyone who saw it. Rida Musi's morale had already been broken when he fought with Yin earlier. At this moment, he was even more unable to cope with the situation and was forced to retreat. The autumn drinker sword pierced straight into his chest. "Commander!" His subordinates cried out in alarm. Rida Musi retreated backward. He was not stabbed in the chest by Xiao Ju, but his armor was cut open and he was picked up by the tip of the sword. In an instant, his chest was no longer covered by armor. "Warriors of Xichang?" Xiao Ju smirked and mocked. "That's all there is to it." Rida Musi was burning with anger, but he could tell that he was not Xiao Ju's match from the exchange of blows just now. The Liangzhou guards were full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Ian was one of them just now. How can a new recruit be so capable? Who knew if there were others? There was no need to continue the sparring on the training field. The most tragic ones were probably the patrolling soldiers who were secretly killed last night. Next was the crossbowmen by the Wulu River. The Chong people were the first to clash with them. The living and lightly injured soldiers helped clean up the battlefield and carried out the corpses of their comrades. The heavily injured were sent to the medical hall and treated by Shun Muxue and her servants. Xiao Ju walked out with Shun Han following behind her. "Uncle!" Chung Lisu was brought over by Qi Wu. She rushed over and said in a frightened voice, "Why are you only back now? You scare me to death. I thought I was going to die here today." Before Xiao Ju could say anything, Chung Lisu saw Shan Han behind Xiao Ju. She thought about how she had suffered at Shan Han's hands a few days ago. Now that her elder was here, she immediately complained, "Uncle, Shun Jiaodo, if it wasn't for Brother He, that blockhead would have started a massacre in the Liangzhou guards. Brother He helped us, but in the end, Shun Jiaodo locked him up in the dungeon. It's too unfair." Dungeon. Xiao Ju glanced at Shan Han. "What happened?" Shan Han felt a headache coming on. He replied, "It's a long story. The situation was urgent, so I didn't dare to confirm He Yan's identity. You even accused him of murder. In the end? In the end, you captured Brother He and released the real murderer. My big brother has forgiven you and saved you today. You will have to apologize to him later." "Enough," Xiao Ju scolded. "Qi Wu, take Chung Lisu back." Uncle, where are you going?" "I'm going to change my clothes." Xiao Ju ignored him and said to Shan Han, "Follow me. I have something to ask you." He had rushed back in a hurry. He had not slept or rested. He had just experienced a fierce battle, so his body was covered in blood and dust. As soon as he returned to his room, he quickly bathed and changed into a clean set of clothes. Just as he walked out, he bumped into a young man in white. This young man was about the same age as Xiao Ju. He had delicate features and a gentle demeanor. He always had a smile on his face. His clothes were embroidered with a red-crowned crane playing in the water. In the middle of winter, he held a folding fan and waved it gently. He did not mind the cold at all. When he saw Xiao Ju, he smiled and said, "Are you injured? Do you want to take a look?" Xiao Ju raised her hand to stop him. "There's no need. There's a dying man next door. Take a look at that one." "Oh." The young man looked at the room next door and revealed an unwilling expression. The white divine physician Lin Shuanghe, have only ever treated women. You're already an exception. We haven't seen each other for a few years. You want me to break the rules as soon as you arrive. Now you even want me to treat your soldiers? How am I any different from those doctors on the streets?" Xiao Ju asked, "Are you going or not?" He Yin felt that she was actually more familiar with Lin Shuanghe than with Xiao Ju among the youths who went to school together in the Xianchang school. There was no other reason. In fact, it was because he was the one who fought with He Yin for the last place in the academy examinations. 8 out of 10 times, it was him. Yes, Lin Shuanghe looked like he had an intelligent face. In fact, he was terrible at the civil and military examinations. He was different from He Yin. He Yin worked hard, but was still the last place. Lin Shuanghe did not work hard at all. He had a good relationship with Xiao Ju. They were inseparable every day. His homework was copied from his good friend. When the teacher asked him to copy the copybook, he paid someone to help him copy it. The youngsters of the virtuous prosperity mansion were either from wealthy or respectable families. None of them lacked those few coins. However, every time this Lin Shuanghe took out a rare treasure, there would always be people who coveted it. He Yin could not resist the temptation and helped Lin Shuanghe copy books for an entire night and received a jade grasshopper. Lin Shuanghe was extremely rich. The Lin family had been practicing medicine for generations. Their ancestors worked in the Imperial Institute of Medicine in the palace. Now Lin Shuanghe's grandfather, Lin Qingtan, was the head of the Imperial Institute of Medicine. Lin Qingtan's youngest son, Lin Mu, was an imperial physician. He was very outstanding in women's medicine and was deeply loved by the imperial concubines in the palace. Lin Mu also liked to develop secret beauty recipes. He had won the favor of the Empress Dowager, Empress, and imperial concubines, and was rewarded from time to time. These rewards were given to Lin Shuanghe. Lin Mu only had Lin Shuanghe as a son and doted on him very much. Lin Shuanghe relied on his family's wealth to spend his days in the Xianchang school. The Lin family did not have high expectations for Lin Shuanghe. They had never thought of asking Lin Shuanghe to be outstanding in civil and military matters. They also did not care about his homework as long as he did not throw his face in front of the Lin family. There was no pressure in the Lin family, and the only people they had to deal with were the teachers in the Xianchang school. Thus, Lin Shuanghe's school life was filled with relaxation and contentment from playing with cats and dogs. The debauchee, Lin Shuanghe, had fallen. Seeing He Yin working so hard, he did not understand. Once when He Yin was busy reciting books, He Yin came over and asked, "Brother He, you are working so hard every day, but you are always in the last place. What is the meaning of this?" He Yin ignored him and continued reciting books. Lin Shuanghe was bored and left by himself. After a few days, He Yin went from the last place to the second last place in the academy examinations. He came to find He Yin again and asked, "Brother He, let's make a deal." Leho might have felt that this was not safe, so he simply used his right hand. It would be harder to find traces. However, Ian still had some doubts. She asked, "Governor, you went to Zhangtai. Did you come back so quickly?" Even if everything went smoothly in Zhangtai, after going back and forth, he wouldn't have come back at this time. Moreover, he had brought back the Nanfu soldiers. "I didn't go to Zhangtai," Xiao Ju said. Ian looked at him. The distress signal from Zhangtai was fake, he said. "I went to Qingnan and brought some of the Nanfu soldiers over." Yin was silent. She had already thought of this when she began to suspect Hu Yuanzhong. This was probably a trap to lure Xiao Ju away. When Xiao Ju wasn't there, Raidamuzi would lead the Chong people to fight the Liangzhou Guard recruits. How could the recruits, who had only trained for half a year, be a match for the Chong people? This battle would be difficult to win. However, Raidamuzi would never have dreamed that Xiao Ju didn't go to Zhangtai at all. Yin asked, "Then did you deliberately put Lei Ho into the vanguard? You suspected him for a long time?" Xiao Ju curled her lips. Yes. Yin was inwardly shocked. In the battle for the flags, she was clearly the one who had taken all 20 flags, but Xiao Ju chose Lei Ho, who had been defeated by her, to go to the vanguard. Yin couldn't understand it no matter how hard he tried. Now, everything suddenly became clear in front of him. Xiao Ju had probably already suspected Lei Ho's identity as a traitor at that time, and deliberately made such a good show to lure the snake out of its hole. She actually didn't realize this was a trap. Boo Boo was much earlier than all of them. How could Raidamuzi have known that from the beginning? She had already stepped into the trap and couldn't turn back. Commander-in-Chief, you are so amazing, Ian said sincerely. Although they were both generals, Xiao Ju had some skills, and he couldn't help but admire her. Xiao Ju looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Not as amazing as you. Ian, me? He crossed his arms and calmly looked at Ian. Are you done asking? If you are, then it's my turn. These words were so strange that Ian didn't understand. He only asked, what do you mean? He laughed and took out something from his chest and threw it in front of Ian. Ian paused and picked it up to take a look. It was a piece of paper that had been folded in half. On it was a rough map and words. Upon closer inspection, it was the map and words of the Liangzhou Guard. That night, when she was locked up in the dungeon, Song Tao Tao came to visit her. Ian asked her to help him with something. It was to hand this matter over to Shinhan. At that time, Ian didn't know what Shinhan would do if he saw this, but the situation was critical and he didn't have time to think about it. Ian was prepared for the worst.